I checked the marriage form and handed it to a clerk along with my fiancé, Alex. The clerk said, "Let me take a look at it for you," and took the form from my hands. While we waited, Alex walked over to talk to his family, looking happy. I could have a great life with him and get along well with his family, I thought to myself. As I was thinking, I overheard a conversation between Alex and his family that caught my attention. It took a moment to fully understand what they were saying. "Once they hand in the marriage form, she won't be able to get away from us," one of them said. "I've finally got my helper. I won't have to work anymore. Alex, you did great. Now we can live comfortably. I want a new purse," another added. "I want new golf clubs," someone else said. "I'll let her do all the housework. We'll live the easy life from now on." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What are they talking about? I thought, frozen in shock. I noticed the clerk looking at me, wide-eyed. She must have overheard everything too. It seemed like Alex and his family were so excited that they didn't notice how loud they were talking. The clerk looked at me and quietly said, "Everything's fine, but I'll return this form to you," handing it back to me. I quietly said, "Thank you," and slipped the form into my bag. My name is Lisa, a 30-year-old office worker. I worked hard to get into a good high school and university, then, I landed a job at a top IT company. I gave my all to my career and was promoted to section manager by age 30. The harder I worked, the more success I had, and I felt proud of myself. But sometimes, I felt lonely. It had been a while since I had a boyfriend. When I saw my friends getting married, having babies, and living happy lives, I couldn't help but feel sad. Am I going to be alone forever? I wondered. "Lisa, what are you thinking about?" My coworker, Ben, snapped me out of my thoughts. "Oh, hey, Ben, was I zoning out? You looked like something was on your mind." "It's nothing, but thanks for asking." "All right," Ben said with a smile before walking off. That's not good, I thought. Maybe I should really start looking for a boyfriend. I asked a friend for advice, and she invited me to a party at her house. That's when I met Alex. He was my age and worked at an IT company too, so we had a lot in common and quickly hit it off. We started dating, and everything went smoothly. As we spent more time together, we grew closer and learned more about each other. Alex was very close to his family, and I met them pretty early in our relationship. I was often invited to his parents' house for dinner. "Lisa, it's nice to meet you. I'm Alex's mom, Sarah. And I'm his dad, David." "Nice to meet you, I'm Lisa," I said, smiling. "Hi, I'm Alex's sister, Emma. I didn't know Alex had such a sweet girlfriend," she said. His family seemed so warm and welcoming. "Are there any foods you don't like?" Sarah asked. "No, I like pretty much everything," I answered. "Alex has a lot of food dislikes," she said, laughing. "Oh, that's just a childhood thing," Alex quickly added. "What did Alex hate?" I asked, curious. "He used to hate carrots and peas. I'd have to hide them in other dishes to get him to eat them." Sarah laughed warmly. "Mom, stop, you're embarrassing me," Alex said, turning red. They were such a happy and loving family, the kind of family I had always wanted. My parents divorced when I was in middle school. I lived with my dad, and my brother lived with my mom. My brother and I didn't get along very well, so I wasn't too upset when we were separated. The reason for my parents' divorce was that they were both very focused on their careers. Neither of them wanted to handle the housework, so they decided to split up and each care for one of us. Both my mom and dad had good jobs, so we never struggled financially. My dad wasn't cold, but he let me do my own thing most of the time. From a young age, I wanted to be independent. I thought the best way to do that was to study hard, get into a top university, and land a great job. I worked really hard, and eventually, I got a job at a well-known IT company. But despite all my success, I never felt the warmth of a close family. That's why I loved being around Alex's family so much. "Think of us as your second family," Alex often said. I think he understood my family situation. I was often invited to dinner at his parents' house. His sister, Emma, treated me like a real sister and often asked me for advice about work. After graduating from university, Emma started working at a company with terrible conditions, long hours, no extra pay, and an overwhelming workload. So she quit her old job and is now working part-time at an ice cream shop. But she's back on the job hunt and often asks me for advice. Thanks, Lisa, this is really helpful, she said one day. Don't mention it, Emma, I enjoy helping you. Lisa, you're like a real big sister to me, I've always wanted one. That's so sweet, my sister never said anything like that to me, and she wasn't as kind as you. Really? Then let's go out and visit lots of places together. Sounds good, let's do that. I'm so excited, there are so many cafes and restaurants I want to check out with you. Alright, we'll go when we have a day off together. Yay, I can't wait. Emma was so sweet, and I was really happy to get to know her. Around this time, Alex suddenly proposed to me. Lisa, will you marry me? I want to build a warm family with you, he said. I was overjoyed. We told Alex's family about the proposal and that we were getting married. Oh, you're finally getting married. Alex finally proposed, now you're going to be my sister-in-law. His family was so excited. We'll need to start planning the wedding. Alex looked so happy. That evening, we had dinner with his family, and afterward, we left. Lisa, are you really getting married? One of my coworkers asked. Yes, I'm finally getting married. Congratulations. Thanks so much. Everyone at work congratulated me warmly. On our next day off, we were invited to Alex's parents' house again for lunch. On the way, Alex said, I need to tell you something important later. Okay. Alex seemed cheerful, so I figured it was good news. When we arrived at his parents' house, there was a big turkey on the table. Are we celebrating something today? I asked. Alex's mom smiled and said, I'm so happy to think that you're going to be my daughter-in-law. She looked so cute as she said this with bright eyes. We opened a cold beer and enjoyed the turkey. It felt nice to celebrate something so special. After chatting casually, Alex said, Oh, I forgot to mention something important. I'm thinking of going to the marriage registry today. What? I've already taken care of everything. I was surprised. Wait, we're going today? Is there something special about today? No, it's not like that. Then why today? I just wanted to get it done as soon as possible. But why not wait until after the wedding? The wedding is still far off. We had visited several venues and found one we really liked, but it was so popular that we could only get a reservation months later. I think we should wait until after the wedding, I suggested. No, I want to be married to you as soon as possible, the sooner, the better for both of us, Alex insisted. Lisa, I agree with Alex, you should get married as soon as you can, Alex's mom added. We had also been planning to find an apartment between Alex's workplace and mine. Well, about that. We were thinking of moving into this house together, Alex said. What? I was shocked. I thought we'd be living alone. I mean, it would take time to find an apartment, and we also need to prepare for the wedding. Then I think it would be better to stay at my parents' house first and take our time looking for a place, Alex reasoned. Alex had a point, but I was nervous about living with his family. I wasn't too keen on the idea of living with family, but Alex's family was so kind and welcoming. Don't worry, Lisa, we're ready to welcome you into our family. We understand your situation, so you don't have to worry about anything, his mom said with a warm smile. That reassured me, and I decided I could live with them. Okay, thank you so much, I said. Then let's head to the marriage registry, Emma said excitedly, and the rest of the family agreed. I nodded, all right, let's do it. We all went to the marriage bureau together. Since Emma hadn't been drinking, she drove us there. When we arrived, I was feeling a bit nervous from the drinks I'd had, so I excused myself to use the bathroom before submitting the marriage registration form. When I returned, Alex's parents and Emma were chatting happily. I handed the marriage registration form to the clerk with Alex. The clerk said, "Let me check it for you," and took the form. While we waited, Alex walked over to his family, looking happy and relaxed. With him, I could have a wonderful family and get along with everyone, I thought. But then, I overheard something disturbing in the conversation between Alex and his family. It took a while, but once they submit the marriage form, she won't be able to get away from us, one of them said. I finally have my helper. I won't have to work now. Alex, you did well. Now we can live the good life. Yes, I want a new purse. And I want new golf clubs. I'll even let her do all the housework. We'll live the easy life from now on. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What are they talking about? I thought. completely shocked. The clerk looked just as stunned, her eyes wide. She must have overheard everything too. It seemed like Alex and his family were so caught up in their excitement that they didn't notice how loud they were speaking. The clerk leaned in and whispered, "Everything looks good, but I'll return this form to you," as she gently handed the form back to me. I whispered back, "Thank you," and quickly tucked the form into my bag. After I put it away, Alex came over to me. "Has everything been submitted without any problems?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. "Great, let's go home," he said with a smile. I followed Alex's family home. They had always seemed warm and friendly, but now they looked intimidating. That day, they drove me home, but the next day Alex said, "We're married now, so it's time for you to move in with my parents." I agreed, deciding to move in to see if what I overheard was really true. Of course, I pretended I'd already canceled my apartment plans, telling Alex I would handle everything myself, and that I'd be selling my belongings to a recycling company soon. We moved in with his parents. As soon as I arrived, everything felt different. "Lisa, I manage all the finances in this house," Alex's mom said, "so you need to put your salary into the household account." "What?" I asked, shocked. Alex nodded. "My mom will handle everything. She'll give you money for lunch and other expenses, and she'll manage the finances." "Oh, really?" I asked. "That's right, so don't worry about giving me your entire salary," Alex added. "And one more thing," his mom continued, "you'll do all the housework." "What?" I replied, taken aback. "Is there a problem with that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm working too," I said. "I think that's too much to ask, handling all the housework too." "Oh, so you're not even willing to try?" she snapped. "Shut your mouth and do the chores," Alex's dad barked, his expression stern and threatening. Even Emma said, "I love those brown bags, get me some too." Alex added, "Lisa, you're my wife now, and you're part of this family, you have to do whatever we say." That's when it hit me, this was the real reason they had wanted me to marry Alex. They were trying to use me from the start. "I won't do it," I said, standing my ground. What did you say?" Alex asked, surprised and angry. "I can't accept any of this, I won't do all the housework, and I won't give you all my salary." Alex and his family were furious. "Hey, Lisa, what do you think you're doing? You're our daughter-in-law now, just do as we say, your only worth is making our lives easier." Their voices were cold and cruel. "I'm not your daughter-in-law," I said firmly. "What?" Alex's mom gasped, looking shocked. "You had that conversation at the marriage bureau, didn't you?" After hearing it, I decided not to register our marriage. Their faces turned pale in disbelief. "Oh, no. Are you sure you didn't submit it? Why don't you check with the marriage bureau?" "I already threw the marriage registration form away. I can't stay with people who want to take advantage of me. Let's break up, Alex." Alex collapsed in defeat. I left their house. Apparently, they had already planned an overseas trip, booked luxury hotels, and bought first-class airline tickets, all because they thought they'd be living off my salary. The day I broke up with Alex was just one day before their trip. They ended up losing a lot of money on steep cancellation fees. Alex asked me to cover the cancellation fees, but of course, I refused and blocked him from contacting me. Now they're buried in debt, about $50,000, and they're all turning on each other. Alex's family didn't really have a good relationship, they were only held together by money. "Lisa, did you cancel the marriage?" "Oh, Justin, have you heard about that already? Rumors sure do spread fast." "You can laugh if you want," he said. "I'm not laughing," Justin replied. "I'm actually happy." "Why?" "Because now I have a chance." I was surprised, and he looked a bit embarrassed when he said that. A few months later, Justin asked me out, and recently, he proposed to me. I'm so happy now. Alex and his family were a bit scary, but I'm glad I found out their true colors before things went any further. As for the rest of my story with Justin, I'll save that for another time. For now, I just wish myself a happy marriage this time.
The weight of silence pressed against my eardrums as I stood beside Jack, my husband's hand cold and lifeless in mine. Marianne's funeral was a stark reminder of how quickly life could change, how swiftly love could be snatched away. The church pews creaked with the shifting weight of mourners, their black attire a sea of grief. I glanced at Jack, searching for a flicker of emotion in his stoic face. Nothing, his jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the mahogany casket adorned with white lilies, Marianne's favorite. How could he be so detached when we'd just lost the woman who'd been more of a mother to me than my own? "Eva," a gravelly voice whispered. I turned to see Robert, my father-in-law, his weathered face etched with sorrow. "There's something you should have." He pressed a photograph into my hand, the edges worn and yellowed with age. I recognized it immediately. Marianne and me, laughing at my wedding reception. My throat tightened as I ran my thumb over her beaming face. "Turn it over," Robert murmured. Frowning, I flipped the photo. Scrawled in Marianne's elegant handwriting were 4 words that made my blood run cold. "Unveil the truth, Eva." I looked up sharply, but Robert had already moved away, melting into the crowd of mourners. My heart raced as questions flooded my mind. What truth? And why me? "You okay?" Jack's voice startled me. I quickly slipped the photo into my purse. "Fine," I lied, forcing a weak smile. "Just overwhelmed." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Let's go pay our respects." As we approached the casket, I felt a sudden irrational urge to run. Something was wrong. The air felt thick, oppressive, as if the very walls of the church were closing in around me. "Marianne was like a mother to me," I whispered, more to myself than to Jack. "I can't believe she's gone." Jack's grip on my hand tightened painfully. "She wasn't your mother, Eva. Remember that." I jerked away, shocked by the venom in his voice. What's that supposed to mean? Before he could answer, we were interrupted by a stream of well-wishers, their condolences a blur of platitudes and awkward embraces. I plastered on a smile, all the while acutely aware of Jack's eyes boring into me. As the service drew to a close, I found myself drifting towards the back of the church, desperate for a moment alone. I slipped into a small alcove, fishing out the photograph with trembling hands. Unveil the truth, Eva. What did Marianne know? And why hadn't she told me while she was alive? There you are. Jack's voice made me jump. I hastily shoved the photo back into my purse. It's time to go to the cemetery. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we walked out into the crisp autumn air, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. At the graveside, I watched as they lowered Marianne's casket into the ground. Each thud of dirt on the lid felt like a blow to my chest. I glanced at Jack, expecting to see some sign of grief, but his face remained impassive. I can't do this, I choked out, stumbling away from the grave. Eva! Jack called after me, but I kept walking, my heels sinking into the damp grass. I found myself in front of a weathered headstone, my vision blurring with tears. A hand touched my shoulder, and I spun around, half expecting to see Marianne's kind face. Instead, I found myself staring into the concerned eyes of my father, Paul. Daddy, I whispered, collapsing into his arms. I've got you, sweetheart, he murmured, stroking my hair. What's going on? I pulled back, wiping my eyes. I don't know. Something's not right. Marianne, she left me a message. And Jack, he's been acting so strange. Paul's brow furrowed, his ex-detective instincts clearly kicking in. What kind of message? Before I could answer, Jack's voice rang out across the cemetery. Eva, where are you? I froze, suddenly terrified of my own husband. Paul squeezed my hand reassuringly. We'll figure this out, he promised. But right now, you need to go back. We can't raise suspicions. I nodded, taking a deep breath. As I walked back towards Jack, Marianne's words echoed in my mind. Unveil the truth, Eva. Whatever that truth was, I was determined to find it, no matter the cost. The days following Marianne's funeral blurred together, a haze of grief and unease. I found myself wandering through our house, touching the little gifts she'd given us over the years, a delicate china teacup, a hand-knitted throw, a painting of the ocean she'd done herself. Each item held a memory, a piece of the woman who'd become my second mother. You're moping again, Jack's voice cut through my reverie. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a frown creasing his forehead. I sighed, setting down the teacup. I'm grieving, Jack. Your mother meant a lot to me. And what about me? He snapped. She was my mother. Why aren't you comforting me? The accusation stung. I've tried, Jack, but you won't let me in. You've been so distant. He scoffed, turning away. Not everyone wears their heart on their sleeve, Eva. As he stormed off, I sank onto the couch, my mind drifting back to happier times. I remembered the day Marianne taught me to make her famous apple pie, flour dusting our cheeks as we laughed together in her sunny kitchen. She'd confided in me that day, telling me how grateful she was that I'd brought joy back into Jack's life. "He was so lost before you, Eva," she'd said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You saved him." Now, as I sat alone in our silent house, I wondered if I'd saved Jack at all, or if I'd merely been a bandage over a wound that had never truly healed. The shrill ring of the phone startled me from my thoughts. I answered, hoping to hear my father's reassuring voice. Instead, it was Robert. "Eva, dear, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I said, surprised. Robert rarely called. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. I found something of Marianne's. I think you should see it." My heart raced. "What is it?" "It's better if I show you in person. Can you come over? Alone?" I glanced towards the studio where Jack was working. "Of course, I'll be there in an hour." As I hung up, a chill ran down my spine. What had Robert found? And why did he want me to come alone? I scribbled a note for Jack, claiming I was going for a walk to clear my head. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I pushed away the guilt. Something told me this was too important to ignore. Robert's house was eerily quiet when I arrived. He ushered me in, his face drawn and pale. "Thank you for coming, Eva. I didn't know who else to turn to." He led me to Marianne's study, a room I'd always loved for its warmth and character. Now it felt cold, abandoned. Robert crossed to the desk and pulled out a leather-bound journal. "I found this hidden in a false drawer," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I think Marianne was afraid of something or someone." With trembling hands, I opened the journal. Marianne's familiar handwriting filled the pages, but the words made my blood run cold. "Jack isn't who we think he is," one entry read. "I fear for Eva's safety. I have to tell her the truth, but how?" I looked up at Robert, my world tilting on its axis. "What does this mean?" Before he could answer, the front door slammed. Jack's voice echoed through the house. "Dad? Eva? What's going on?" Robert's face drained of color. He snatched the journal from my hands and shoved it into a drawer. "You can't tell him you've seen this," he hissed. "Promise me, Eva." Footsteps approached the study. I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I was sure Jack would hear it. As the door swung open, revealing Jack's suspicious face, one thought blazed through my mind. What terrible secret had Marianne taken to her grave, and how much danger was I in? The memory of Marianne's last day haunted me as I paced our living room, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It had been a typical Sunday brunch, filled with laughter and the aroma of Marianne's famous blueberry pancakes. How could I have known it would be the last time I'd see her alive? "Eva, you're wearing a hole in the carpet," Jack said, his voice laced with irritation. He sat on the couch, sketching furiously, dark circles under his eyes. I stopped, studying him. When had the man I loved become a stranger? "I'm sorry, I just can't stop thinking about your mother. Her death was so sudden." Jack's pencil snapped. "People die, Eva. It happens." His callousness shocked me. "Jack, she was your mother." He stood abruptly, his sketchbook falling to the floor. As he bent to retrieve it, a folded paper fluttered out. I snatched it up before he could react. "Eva, don't," he started, but I had already unfolded it. My blood ran cold. It was a detailed drawing of Marianne, her face contorted in fear, hands clutching her throat. In the corner, scrawled in Jack's messy handwriting, "She knew too much." "What is this?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Jack's face darkened. "It's art, Eva. You wouldn't understand." "Art?" I felt sick. "This looks like you were imagining her death." He lunged for the paper, but I stepped back, clutching it to my chest. "Tell me the truth, Jack. What happened to Marianne?" His eyes, once so warm and loving, now glittered with something dangerous. "You're being hysterical. Give me the drawing." I shook my head, backing away. "I'm calling my dad." Before I could reach my phone, Jack grabbed my wrist, squeezing hard enough to make me gasp. "You're not calling anyone. This is family business." "Let go of me." I wrenched my arm free, my heart pounding. A knock at the door made us both freeze. "Eva? Jack? It's Robert. I need to talk to you." Jack's face paled. He snatched the drawing from my hand, crumpling it into his pocket. "Not a word," he hissed, before plastering on a smile and opening the door. Robert stood there, looking haggard. His eyes darted between us, sensing the tension. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Dad," Jack said smoothly. "What's up?" Robert hesitated. I found something in your mother's things, a letter. It's addressed to Eva. Jack's facade cracked for a moment. What? Why would Mom write to Eva and not me? I don't know, son. Robert handed me a sealed envelope. She left instructions for me to give this to you, Eva, in the event of her death. My hands trembled as I took the letter. Jack's eyes bored into me, his jaw clenched. Well, open it, he snapped. With shaking fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Marianne's elegant handwriting filled the page. As I read, my world tilted on its axis. My dearest Eva, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I pray it was peaceful, but I fear it wasn't. There are things you need to know about Jack, about our family. Things I was too cowardly to tell you in life. Jack isn't who you think he is. He's dangerous, Eva. Get out while you can. Go to your father. He'll know what to do. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you better. Please be safe. And remember, unveil the truth. All my love, Marianne. I looked up, my vision blurring with tears. Robert watched me anxiously, while Jack's face had transformed into a mask of fury. What does it say? He demanded, reaching for the letter. I clutched it to my chest, backing away. Stay away from me, Jack. Eva, Robert said softly, what's going on? But before I could answer, Jack lunged at me, his hands outstretched. I screamed, dodging his grasp and running for the door. As I fled into the night, Marianne's words echoed in my mind. Jack was dangerous, and I was no longer safe in my own home. My heart pounded as I raced through the darkened streets, Marianne's letter clutched tightly in my hand. The cool night air stung my tear-streaked face, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. Jack's enraged face haunted me, pushing me forward until I found myself at Robert's doorstep. I hesitated, my fist hovering over the door. Could I trust him? The memory of his calm demeanor at Marianne's funeral sent a chill down my spine, but I had nowhere else to go. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Robert stood there, his face a mask of concern. Eva? What happened? I stumbled inside, collapsing onto his couch. Marianne's letter, I gasped, holding it out to him with trembling hands. She said Jack is dangerous, that I need to get away. Robert's face paled as he read the letter. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. I was afraid of this, he murmured. You knew? I felt a surge of anger. Why didn't you say something? He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit of his 65 years. I suspected, but I didn't want to believe it. Jack, he's always had a darkness in him. Marianne tried to protect him, to hide it from the world. Protect him from what? I demanded. Robert, what aren't you telling me? He took a deep breath. When Jack was a teenager, there was an incident. A girl in his class went missing. They never found her, but Marianne, she found evidence in Jack's room. Bloody clothes, the girl's necklace. I felt the blood drain from my face. No, I whispered, that's not possible. Marianne covered it up, Robert continued, his voice hollow. She thought she could save him, change him. When you came into his life, we thought maybe. A loud bang interrupted him. We both jumped as the front door flew open, revealing Jack, his eyes wild with rage. You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? He snarled, advancing towards me. I scrambled to my feet, putting the coffee table between us. Jack, please, we can get you help. He laughed, a chilling sound that made my skin crawl. Help? I don't need help, Eva. I need you to mind your own business. Robert stood, placing himself between Jack and me. Son, calm down. Let's talk about this. Talk? Jack's voice dripped with contempt. Like you and Mom talked about me behind my back all these years? Treating me like I was broken, like I needed to be fixed. We were trying to protect you, Robert pleaded. Protect me? Jack's hand disappeared into his jacket pocket. When it emerged, my blood ran cold. The glint of metal in the dim light could only be one thing, a gun. Jack, no, I cried, but it was too late. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. Robert crumpled to the floor, a red stain blossoming on his chest. I screamed, dropping to my knees beside him. Robert, oh God, Robert! Jack stood over us, the gun now trained on me. You should have left it alone, Eva. We could have been happy. As I looked up at my husband, the man I thought I knew, I saw a stranger. A monster. And I knew in that moment that my life would never be the same. What are you going to do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jack's lips curved into a cold smile. We're going on a little trip, darling, just you and me. As he grabbed my arm, yanking me to my feet, I made a silent vow. I would survive this. I would unveil the truth no matter the cost. for Marianne, for Robert, and for myself. The door slammed behind us, leaving Robert bleeding on the floor. As Jack shoved me into his car, I prayed my father would somehow find me. It was my only hope now. The car sped through the night, streetlights blurring past as Jack drove with reckless abandon. My mind raced, desperately searching for a way out of this nightmare. Robert's blood-stained face haunted me. Was he still alive? And what about my father? Did he know I was in danger? "Where are we going, Jack?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He glanced at me, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. "Somewhere we can start over. Somewhere no one knows us." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "We can't just disappear. People will look for us." Jack's laugh was hollow. "Let them look. By the time they figure it out, we'll be long gone." As we drove, I surreptitiously felt for my phone, hoping to send a distress signal. My heart sank when I realized it was gone, probably left behind at Robert's house in the chaos. Suddenly, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face darkening. "Damn it," he muttered. "What is it?" I asked, trying to peer at the screen. He shoved the phone in his pocket. "Nothing. Change of plans." The car screeched as Jack made a sharp turn, heading away from the highway and onto a narrow, wooded road. Fear clawed at my throat as trees closed in around us, swallowing the car in darkness. "Jack, please," I begged. "This isn't you. We can get help, figure this out together." He slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop. "This is me, Eva," he shouted, his face contorted with rage. "This has always been me. You just never wanted to see it." As he ranted, my eyes darted around, searching for anything I could use as a weapon. That's when I saw it. A familiar dirt path leading off into the woods. With a jolt, I realized where we were. "The cabin," I whispered. Jack's anger morphed into a chilling smile. "Smart girl, Mom's old writing retreat, isolated, off the grid, the perfect place for us to reconnect." My blood ran cold as memories flooded back. Marianne had brought me here once, showing me her sanctuary, but there had been something off about it, hidden rooms, strange locks on the doors. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a cabin, it was a fortress. Jack roughly pulled me from the car, marching me down the overgrown path. As we approached the cabin, a sensor light flickered on, illuminating the weathered structure. "Home sweet home," Jack muttered, fumbling with a set of keys. I knew I had to act fast. This might be my only chance. As Jack struggled with the lock, I took a deep breath and made my decision. I slammed my elbow into his ribs with all my strength. He gasped, doubling over, and I took off running into the woods. Branches whipped at my face as I crashed through the underbrush, Jack's enraged shouts echoing behind me. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stop. Suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath my feet. I tumbled down a steep embankment, landing hard at the bottom. Pain shot through my ankle as I tried to stand. Jack's voice grew closer. "Eva, you can't hide from me." Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down. I couldn't give up now. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I dragged myself into a dense thicket, praying the darkness would conceal me. As I huddled there, heart pounding, a new sound cut through the night, a distant siren. Hope surged through me. Had someone found Robert? Were they looking for me? Jack must have heard it too. His footsteps stopped, then quickly retreated back towards the cabin. I let out a shaky breath, tears of relief streaming down my face, but I knew this was far from over. I was injured, lost in the woods, with a dangerous man hunting me. And somewhere out there was the truth about Marianne's death, a truth that Jack was willing to kill to protect. As the sirens grew louder, I made a vow. I would survive this night. I would uncover the truth, and I would make sure Jack paid for everything he'd done. With renewed determination, I began to crawl towards the sound of salvation, leaving a trail of blood and broken twigs in my wake. I stumbled through my father's front door, my clothes torn and muddy, my ankle throbbing with each step. Paul's eyes widened in shock as he took in my disheveled appearance. "Eva! My God, what happened?" He rushed to support me, guiding me to the couch. As I collapsed onto the cushions, the events of the past few hours came pouring out in a torrent of words. Marianne's letter, Robert's confession, Jack's true nature, the cabin in the woods. I told him everything. Paul's face grew grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, he sat in stunned silence for a moment before his ex-detective instincts kicked in. "We need to call the police," he said, reaching for his phone. I grabbed his arm. "No, Jack has connections in the department. We can't trust them." Paul's brow furrowed. "Then what do you suggest?" I took a deep breath. "We need to find proof, something concrete that ties Jack to Marianne's death and the missing girl from his past." My father nodded slowly. "I might know someone who can help, an old colleague who works as a private investigator now. But Eva, this is dangerous. Jack's already proven he's willing to kill." "I know," I said, my voice shaking. "But I can't let him get away with this. For Marianne, for that poor girl, for all of us. We have to stop him." Paul squeezed my hand. "All right, let me make a call." As he stepped away to contact his friend, I limped to the window, scanning the street for any sign of Jack. My nerves were frayed, every shadow seeming to hold a threat. Paul returned, his face grim. "My contact can meet us in an hour. He thinks he might have a lead on where to find evidence against Jack." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read the message. "I know where you are. You have something that belongs to me. Bring Marianne's letter to the old warehouse on Elm Street in 1 hour, or Daddy Dearest pays the price." Attached was a photo of my father's house, clearly taken from across the street. "Dad," I whispered, showing him the message. "He's here. He's watching us." Paul's face hardened. "We need to leave. Now." We slipped out the back door, my father supporting me as we made our way to his car. As we drove away, I saw a figure step out of the shadows, watching us go. "Jack, where are we going?" I asked, my heart racing. "To meet my contact," Paul replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "He might be our only chance to end this." As we sped through the night, my mind whirled. How had everything gone so wrong? How had I missed the signs of Jack's true nature for so long? We pulled up to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. A lone figure stood waiting, his face obscured by shadows. "Stay in the car," Paul ordered, reaching for something under his seat. He pulled out a gun, checking it quickly before tucking it into his waistband. "Dad, no," I protested. "It's too dangerous." He gave me a sad smile. "I'm your father, Eva. Protecting you is my job." As he stepped out of the car, a shot rang out. Paul stumbled, clutching his shoulder. I screamed, scrambling out of the car towards him. Another figure emerged from the darkness. Jack, his gun trained on us both. "I warned you, Eva," he said, his voice cold. "Now it's time to face the consequences." I stood frozen, caught between my injured father and my murderous husband. In that moment, I realized the true meaning of Marianne's words. The truth I needed to unveil wasn't just about Jack's crimes. It was about my own strength, my ability to fight back against the darkness that threatened to consume us all. As Jack advanced, his finger tightening on the trigger, I knew I had to make a choice. Run and save myself, or stand and fight for the truth, no matter the cost. With my heart pounding in my ears, I made my decision. Time seemed to slow as Jack advanced, his gun trained on my father. In that moment, I made my choice. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't cower. I would fight. "Jack, stop," I shouted, stepping between him and my father. "This ends now." His eyes, once warm and loving, now cold as ice, locked onto mine. "You're right, Eva. It does end now." I heard my father groan behind me, struggling to his feet. "Eva, get out of here." But I stood my ground. "Why Jack? Why Marianne? Why any of this?" A twisted smile played on his lips. "She was going to ruin everything, just like you're trying to do now. By telling the truth?" I challenged, my voice stronger than I felt. "The truth," he spat. "The truth is, I'm smarter than all of you. I've always been smarter. Marianne thought she could control me, manipulate me with her secrets and her lies, but I saw through it all." As he ranted, I noticed movement in the shadows behind him. The private investigator? I had to keep Jack talking. "What about the girl from your past?" I pressed. "The one who went missing." Jack's face contorted with rage. "She was nothing. A stupid, nosy bitch who couldn't mind her own business, just like you, Eva, just like Marianne." So you killed them both," I said, my heart pounding. "Your own mother, Jack?" He laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the abandoned factory, and that it was easy. A little poison in her tea, and all her meddling was over. And now... A gunshot rang out, cutting off Jack's words. He stumbled, a look of shock crossing his face as he crumpled to the ground. Behind him stood Robert, my father-in-law, his hands shaking as he lowered the gun. "I'm sorry," Robert whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry. I should have stopped him years ago. As Jack lay gasping on the ground, the private investigator emerged from the shadows, quickly disarming him and calling for backup. I rushed to my father's side, helping him sit up. "Dad, are you okay?" He nodded grimly, pressing a hand to his wounded shoulder. "I'll live. Eva, I'm so proud of you." Sirens wailed in the distance as I turned back to Robert. "You knew," I said, my voice trembling. "You knew what he was capable of." Robert's shoulders sagged with the weight of his guilt. "I suspected, but I couldn't. I didn't want to believe it. Marianne and I, we thought we could protect him, change him. We were wrong." As the police cars pulled up, their lights painting the scene in harsh reds and blues, I felt a strange mix of relief and devastation wash over me. It was over, but at what cost? Jack, now handcuffed and being led to a police car, locked eyes with me one last time. "This isn't over, Eva," he snarled. "You'll never be free of me." I watched as they drove away, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and fear. Robert approached me hesitantly, his face etched with sorrow. "Eva, I know I have no right to ask, but can you ever forgive me?" I looked at this broken man, this father who had tried so desperately to save his son from himself. In his eyes, I saw the same pain and regret that I felt in my own heart. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I think Marianne would want us to try." As the paramedics tended to my father and the investigators combed the scene, I stood in the middle of it all, feeling both stronger and more vulnerable than I ever had before. The truth had been unveiled, but the cost had been devastating. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't the end of my journey. It was just the beginning. There were still questions to be answered, wounds to be healed, and a life to rebuild from the ashes of everything I thought I knew. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The truth had set me free, but now I had to learn how to live with that freedom. The courthouse buzzed with tension as I took the stand, my eyes locking with Jack's across the room. His face, once so familiar, now seemed like a mask hiding a stranger. As I recounted the events that led to this moment, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. "Mrs. Lawson," the prosecutor began, "can you tell us about the night your mother-in-law, Marianne, died?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Marianne's final message. "Unveil the truth," she had written, and that's exactly what I intended to do. "I found her in her study," I said, my voice steady. "At first I thought she was sleeping, but then I saw the empty teacup and I knew something was wrong." As I spoke, I watched Jack's face, his jaw clenched, a flicker of something, fear, anger, passing through his eyes. "Did you suspect foul play?" the prosecutor pressed. I nodded. "Not at first, but then I found a letter Marianne had left for me. She warned me about Jack, told me he was dangerous." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Jack's attorney objected, but the judge overruled him. "And what did you do with this information, Mrs. Lawson?" I recounted the harrowing events that followed, my escape to my father's house, the confrontation at the abandoned factory, Robert's shocking intervention. With each revelation, I felt the truth settling over the courtroom like a heavy blanket. When it was Jack's turn to testify, I steeled myself, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "I did it," Jack said, his voice cold and emotionless. "I killed my mother. I killed that girl years ago, and I would have killed Eva too, if I'd had the chance." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "Why?" the prosecutor asked, clearly thrown by Jack's sudden confession. Jack's eyes met mine, a chilling smile playing on his lips. "Because I could, because they all thought they were better than me, smarter than me, but I showed them, didn't I?" As Jack's confession unfolded, detailing years of manipulation and violence, I felt a strange sense of relief washing over me. The truth was finally out, in all its ugly glory. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, drained. As they led Jack away, he called out to me one last time, "You think this is over, Eva? It's never over." Outside the courthouse, I found Robert waiting, looking older and more broken than ever. "Eva," he began, his voice cracking, "I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am, for everything." I looked at this man who had lost everything in his misguided attempt to protect his son. "I know, Robert. I know." "What will you do now?" he asked. I thought about Marianne, about her final message to me. "I'm going to live," I said simply. I'm going to dance again to create, and I'm going to make sure Marianne's story and the story of that poor girl is never forgotten." Robert nodded, tears in his eyes. "She would have been proud of you, Eva, so proud." As I walked away from the courthouse, my father by my side, I felt the weight of the past few months lifting. The truth had been unveiled, just as Marianne had wanted. It hadn't been easy, and the cost had been high, but I had survived. "You okay, sweetheart?" my father asked, concern etched on his face. I smiled, a real smile for the first time in what felt like forever. "I will be, Dad. I will be." The sun was setting as we drove home, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. As I watched the colors blend and change, I thought about the future stretching out before me. It was uncertain, yes, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. Marianne's final gift to me hadn't just been the truth about Jack. It had been the strength to reclaim my life, to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. As I closed my eyes, I could almost hear her voice whispering on the wind, "Dance, Eva, live, love, and never stop seeking the truth." And in that moment, I knew that's exactly what I would do. The buzzing of my phone jolted me awake. I fumbled in the dark, my heart racing as I squinted at the bright screen. 3:17 a.m. Who could be texting at this hour? Mike's name flashed across the top, and a chill ran down my spine. I glanced over at my husband's empty side of the bed. He was working the night shift at the mall again, or so he'd said. With trembling fingers, I unlocked the phone and read the message. "Sorry, babe. Won't make it home tonight. Covering for Jim." My stomach churned. This was the third time this month he'd stayed out all night. I scrolled through his recent messages, my suspicion growing with each swipe. "Can't wait to see you again. Miss your touch. You're so beautiful." None of these were to me. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. The bedroom suddenly felt suffocating. I stumbled to the bathroom, flicking on the harsh fluorescent light. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes and thinning hair that Mike never failed to point out. "You're being paranoid, Emily," I whispered to myself, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. A soft knock on the door made me jump. "Mom?" Kelly's voice called out. "Is everything okay?" I opened the door to find my daughter, bleary-eyed but concerned. "Sorry, sweetie. Did I wake you?" She shook her head. "I heard you get up. Is it Dad again?" The perceptiveness in her eyes made my heart ache. At 18, she shouldn't have to worry about her parents' marriage. I forced a smile. "It's nothing, honey. Go back to bed." Kelly hesitated, then said, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you about Dad." My breath caught in my throat. "What is it?" She bit her lip, looking torn. I saw him yesterday, at the coffee shop near the mall. He was with someone." "A coworker?" I asked, clinging to hope. Kelly shook her head slowly. "It was a woman I've never seen before. They looked close." The room spun around me. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "Are you sure?" "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want to say anything, but after seeing his text." She gestured towards the phone on my nightstand. I took a deep breath, trying to process this information. "Thank you for telling me, Kelly. We'll figure this out, okay?" She nodded, giving me a quick hug before retreating to her room. I sank onto the bed, my mind racing. After 20 years of marriage, could Mike really be cheating on me? I thought back to our arranged marriage, orchestrated by our parents who thought we'd be a perfect match. Mike, the charming janitor with big dreams, and me, the dedicated nurse. We'd made it work, or so I thought. The first rays of sunlight were peeking through the curtains when I heard the front door open. Mike's heavy footsteps echoed through the house. I steeled myself, determined to confront him. He appeared in the doorway, looking surprised to see me awake. "Emily, what are you doing up so early?" I held up his phone, my voice steadier than I felt. "Care to explain these messages, Mike?" His face paled, then quickly morphed into a mask of innocence. "What messages? You know I hate when you go through my phone." "Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "Who is she?" Mike's jaw clenched. "It's nothing, just a friend." "A friend you can't wait to see again? A friend you miss touching?" My voice cracked, betraying my hurt. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "Look, Emily, it's not what you think. You're overreacting as usual." "As usual?" I stood up, anger replacing my sadness. "You mean like how I overreact when you constantly criticize my appearance? My thinning hair?" Mike's eyes narrowed. "Maybe if you took better care of yourself." "Stop," I cut him off. Just stop. I want the truth, Mike. Are you having an affair? The silence that followed was deafening. Mike's gaze dropped to the floor, and in that moment, I knew. My world shattered, leaving me standing amidst the ruins of our marriage, wondering how I'd ever put the pieces back together. The hospital corridors felt colder than usual as I made my rounds. My mind kept drifting back to Mike's half-hearted denials and the look in his eyes when I confronted him. I shook my head, trying to focus on my patients. They deserved better than a distracted nurse. Emily? Dr. Patel's voice snapped me back to reality. Are you all right? You seem a bit off today. I forced a smile. I'm fine, just a bit tired. What can I do for you? He handed me a chart. Mrs. Johnson in 305 needs her meds, and Emily, if you need to talk, my door's always open. I nodded gratefully and headed to Mrs. Johnson's room. As I administered her medication, she studied me with wise, wrinkled eyes. Trouble at home, dear? She asked softly. I hesitated, then sighed. Is it that obvious? She patted my hand. When you've been around as long as I have, you learn to read people. Don't let it dim your light, honey. Her words struck a chord. How long had I been letting Mike dim my light? I thought back to the early days of our marriage. He'd been so charming then, full of big dreams. But as the years passed, those dreams never materialized. Instead, he bounced from job to job while I worked long hours at the hospital to keep us afloat. My shift ended, and I dreaded going home. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Mike. Working late again. Don't wait up. I gripped the steering wheel, anger bubbling up inside me. How many nights had I heard that excuse? How many times had I rearranged my schedule to accommodate his ever-changing jobs? At home, I found Kelly in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner. The smell of burnt pasta filled the air. "Oh, Mom," she exclaimed. "I wanted to surprise you, but I think I messed up." I couldn't help but laugh. "It's the thought that counts, sweetie. How about we order pizza instead?" As we sat eating, Kelly cleared her throat. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey. Why do you let Dad treat you the way he does?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She set down her slice, looking serious. "The way he criticizes you all the time, especially about your hair. It's not right, Mom." I touched my thinning hair self-consciously. Mike's voice echoed in my head. "You're letting yourself go, Emily. No wonder I have to work so hard to look at you." "It's complicated, Kelly," I said weakly. "No, it's not," she insisted. "You deserve better. You're beautiful, Mom, and smart and kind. Dad's an idiot if he can't see that." Tears welled up in my eyes. When did my daughter become so wise? Just then the front door slammed. Mike stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. "Where's my dinner?" he demanded. I stood up, anger replacing my earlier sadness. "You said you were working late. We didn't know when you'd be home." He scoffed. "Right, because it's so hard to keep a plate warm. What do you even do all day, Emily?" Kelly jumped to her feet. "She saves lives, Dad. What do you do besides criticize her?" Mike's face darkened. "Watch your tone, young lady. This is between your mother and me." "No," I said firmly, surprising myself. "Kelly's right. I'm tired of your criticism, Mike. I'm tired of feeling like I'm not enough." He laughed bitterly. "Not enough? Look at yourself, Emily. Your hair's falling out, you've gained weight, you're hardly the woman I married." The words stung, but I stood my ground. "And you're hardly the man I thought I married, a man who respects his wife, who contributes to his family." Mike's eyes narrowed. "You want to talk about contributions? Who do you think pays for this roof over your head?" "I do," I shouted, years of frustration pouring out. "I pay the mortgage, the bills, Kelly's tuition. What do you contribute besides empty promises and cruel words?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mike stared at me, shock and anger warring on his face. Kelly looked between us, worry etched in her features. Finally, Mike spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "If that's how you feel, maybe I should just leave." My heart pounded, but I held firm. "Maybe you should." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As the sound echoed through the house, I realized with startling clarity that our marriage was beyond repair. And for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as I sipped my coffee, lost in thought. It had been 3 days since Mike stormed out, and the house felt eerily quiet without his constant criticism. Kelly shuffled in, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep. "Any word from Dad?" I shook my head. "Nothing. But don't worry, honey, we'll be okay. She nodded, then hesitated. Mom, there's something I need to tell you about Dad. My heart sank. What is it? Kelly took a deep breath. Remember when I told you I saw him at the coffee shop? Well, I didn't tell you everything. He was with a woman, young, brunette, and they were kissing. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Hot coffee splashed my legs, but I barely felt it. Are you sure? Kelly nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have told you sooner. I hugged her tightly, my mind reeling. It's not your fault, sweetie. Thank you for telling me. After Kelly left for school, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Mike's number on my phone. My finger hovered over the call button, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. Instead, I dialed another number. Ace Investigations, how can I help you? An hour later, I sat across from Jack Reeves, a private investigator with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. So, Mrs. Roberts, you suspect your husband is having an affair? I nodded, twisting my wedding ring. I need to know for sure. Can you help me? Jack leaned forward. We'll get to the bottom of this, ma'am, but I have to warn you. Are you prepared for what we might find? Was I? The thought of concrete proof made my stomach churn. But I squared my shoulders and met his gaze. Yes, I need the truth. Over the next week, I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the gnawing anxiety. Jack called with updates, each one chipping away at my hope. Mike's late nights weren't at the mall. His work trips were to a nearby hotel. Finally, Jack asked me to meet him at a cafe downtown. As I approached, I saw him sitting at an outdoor table, a thick envelope in front of him. Mrs. Roberts, he said gently, I have the evidence you asked for. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Mike with a young brunette, holding hands, kissing, entering a hotel. My vision blurred as I flipped through them. I'm sorry, Jack said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. As I gathered the photos, a familiar figure caught my eye. I froze, my blood running cold. Mrs. Roberts, are you all right? I held up one of the photos, my voice barely a whisper. I know her. Jack leaned in. The woman your husband's with. Yes, I say, anger replacing shock. It's Linda, Mike's mother. Jack's eyes widened. His mother? I shook my head, memories flooding back. Not his biological mother, his stepmother. She married Mike's father when Mike was in his 20s. She's only a few years older than him. The pieces started falling into place. Linda's hostility towards me, the knowing looks between her and Mike at family gatherings. How could I have been so blind? Mrs. Roberts, Jack said gently, what do you want to do now? I stood up, a strange calm settling over me. Now, I want a divorce. As I walked home, my phone buzzed. A text from Mike. We need to talk. I'm coming home tonight. I stared at the screen, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to confront him, to scream and demand answers. But another part, a stronger part, knew it was time to take control of my life. I typed a reply, don't bother. I know about Linda. Your things will be on the porch. Don't come inside. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it, the point of no return. Taking a deep breath, I pressed send and watched as my message delivered, signaling the end of my marriage and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As I walked up to my house, I saw Kelly waiting on the porch, concern etched on her face. I realized then that while one chapter was ending, the most important one, my life with my daughter, was still being written. And this time, I would make sure it had a happier ending. The weight of the manila envelope felt like a ton of bricks in my hands as I paced the living room. Inside were the divorce papers I had drawn up, a decision that had taken every ounce of courage I possessed. Kelly watched me from the couch, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and support. Are you sure about this, Mom? She asked softly. I paused, meeting her gaze. I have to be, honey. We deserve better than this. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made my heart race. Mike was home. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. Kelly, why don't you go to your room? I suggested, not wanting her to witness what was about to unfold. She hesitated, then nodded, giving me a quick hug before disappearing upstairs. The front door opened, and Mike stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. Emily? He called out, his words slurring slightly. Where's my dinner? I stepped into the hallway, the envelope clutched to my chest like a shield. We need to talk, Mike. He squinted at me, then at the envelope. What's that? Without a word, I handed it to him. He fumbled with the clasp, pulling out the papers. As his eyes scanned the first page, his face contorted from confusion to shock, then anger. "Divorce papers," he spat. "What the hell is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want a divorce." Mike laughed bitterly. "You can't be serious, after everything I've done for you?" "Everything you've done?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You mean the lies? The affairs? The constant criticism?" His eyes narrowed. "Affairs? What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, bringing up the photos the private investigator had sent me. "I know about Linda, Mike. Your stepmother? Really?" The color drained from his face as I showed him the evidence. For a moment, he looked like he might crumple, but then his expression hardened. "You had me followed?" he growled. "You invaded my privacy?" "Don't you dare turn this around on me," I shot back. "You've been cheating on me with your stepmother. You've made me feel worthless for years. It ends now." Mike's fist slammed against the wall, making me flinch. "You can't do this to me, Emily. I was going to leave you after retirement, take my pension, and start over. You're ruining everything." His words hit me like a slap in the face. "You were planning to leave me? After all these years?" He sneered. "Look at you. Your hair's falling out. You've let yourself go. Did you really think I'd stick around forever?" Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up anger and hurt came pouring out. "I've supported us for years while you jumped from job to job. I've raised our daughter, paid our bills, and put up with your abuse. No more, Mike. It's over. You'll regret this." He snarled, crumpling the divorce papers in his fist. "I'll make sure you don't get a penny." I stood my ground, meeting his gaze. "Try it. I have evidence of your affair, your financial negligence. Do you really want to take this to court?" For a moment, fear flashed in his eyes. Then, without another word, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sank to the floor, my legs giving out as the adrenaline faded. Kelly appeared at the top of the stairs, tears in her eyes. "Mom?" she called softly. "Are you okay?" I looked up at her, managing a small smile. "I will be, honey. We both will be." As Kelly came down to sit beside me, I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. One where we wouldn't let anyone make us feel small ever again. "What happens now?" Kelly asked, leaning her head on my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, feeling a newfound strength coursing through me. "Now, we rebuild. Together." The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake. Squinting at the clock, I saw it was barely 5 a.m. My heart raced as I answered. "Hello?" "Emily." "It's Carol, your mother-in-law." Her voice was tight with worry. "Mike's here. He's not in a good state." I sat up, fully alert now. "What do you mean?" "He's drunk, ranting about divorce papers and how you're trying to ruin him." "Emily, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Carol, I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. Mike's been having an affair with Linda." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Carol spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Linda? His stepmother?" "Yes," I confirmed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "I have proof. I'm filing for divorce." Carol's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Oh, Emily, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I assured her. "This isn't your fault." "He wants to talk to you," Carol said suddenly. "He's demanding it. Should I put him on?" My instinct was to refuse, but something made me hesitate. "Okay," I heard myself say. Mike's voice came through, slurred and angry. "Emily, you can't do this to me. I'll fight you every step of the way." "Mike, it's over," I said firmly. "We both know it." "You think you can just throw me away?" he snarled. "After everything? I made you who you are." His words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I was that insecure young woman again, desperate for his approval. But then I thought of Kelly, of the strength I'd found in standing up to him. "No, Mike," I said, my voice steady. "I made myself who I am, despite you, not because of you." He laughed bitterly. "You're nothing without me, Emily. Your thinning hair, your—" I cut him off. "Goodbye, Mike. Don't call again unless it's through our lawyers." I ended the call, my hands shaking. As I set the phone down, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. My hair, the source of so much of Mike's criticism, seemed to mock me. Without thinking, I grabbed a pair of scissors from my dresser. Strand by strand, I began to cut. With each snip, I felt a weight lifting. By the time Kelly found me, tear-streaked and surrounded by fallen hair, I felt lighter than I had in years. "Mom?" Kelly's voice was filled with concern. "What happened?" I turned to her, managing a small smile. I'm taking control, honey. No more letting your father's words define me. Kelly's eyes widened, then softened with understanding. She grabbed another pair of scissors. Let me help you even it out. As we worked together, I filled Kelly in on Mike's call. Her jaw clenched with anger, but she remained focused on the task at hand. You know, she said, as she trimmed the back of my hair, Aunt Sarah went through something similar with her ex. She said the hardest part was facing everyone after. I hadn't thought about that. The idea of facing our friends, our extended family, filled me with dread. But then I caught sight of my new reflection, shorter hair, tear-stained cheeks, but eyes bright with determination. We'll face them together, I said, squeezing Kelly's hand. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Linda. We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th at noon. My stomach churned. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to cut all ties with that part of my life. But another part, the part that had found the strength to stand up to Mike, knew this was a conversation I needed to have. I showed Kelly the text. What do you think? She studied it for a moment, then looked at me with a mix of concern and pride. I think you should go, Mom. You deserve answers. I nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over me. This meeting with Linda could go 1,000 different ways, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to face whatever came my way. As I got ready to leave, I caught my reflection one last time. The woman staring back at me wasn't perfect. Her hair was uneven, her eyes tired, but I was strong. But she was ready. I was ready. The cafe bustled with the lunch crowd as I sat across from Linda, my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, and the woman who'd been having an affair with my husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emily, Linda began, her voice low. I know you must hate me. I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess. Hate is too simple a word for what I feel, Linda. She nodded, looking down at her untouched coffee. I understand, but there's something you need to know about Mike, something that might affect your divorce settlement. My guard went up immediately. What are you talking about? Linda took a deep breath. Mike's in debt, serious debt. He's been gambling, Emily, for years. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Gambling? But how? Where did he get the money? He's been dipping into his retirement fund, Linda explained, her face grim. And he took out a second mortgage on your house without telling you. My mind reeled. Our house, the home where I'd raised Kelly, where I'd poured my heart and soul, was at risk. How much? I managed to ask. Linda slid a piece of paper across the table. The number written on it made my blood run cold. This can't be right, I whispered. I'm afraid it is, Linda said softly. Emily, I'm so sorry for everything. The affair, keeping this from you. I thought I loved him, but Mike, he's not the man either of us thought he was. I barely heard her apology, my mind racing with the implications. If this was true, the divorce settlement I'd been counting on, the fresh start I'd been planning for Kelly and me, was in jeopardy. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Emily, we need to talk. New information has come to light about Mike's finances. Call me ASAP. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. I have to go. Linda reached out, grabbing my wrist. Emily, wait, there's more. I paused, dreading what else she could possibly tell me. Mike, he's planning to contest the divorce. He's going to claim you were emotionally abusive, that you drove him to the affair. He's going to try to take everything, Emily. The room spun around me. I yanked my arm free and stumbled out of the cafe, gasping for air. On the sidewalk, I fumbled with my phone, dialing my lawyer with shaking hands. As it rang, I caught sight of my reflection in a store window. My new, shorter haircut, a symbol of my newfound strength, seemed to mock me now. Emily? My lawyer's voice came through. I'm glad you called. We need to discuss. I know, I cut him off. I just found out about the debt, the gambling, all of it. What do we do? He sighed heavily. It's not good, Emily. Mike's financial situation complicates things significantly, and if he contests the divorce as he's threatening to. He can't win, I said, my voice rising with panic. He can't take everything. I have proof of the affair. Infidelity doesn't carry as much weight as you might think in court, he explained gently, and if he can make a case for emotional abuse. I leaned against the building, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. Everything I'd fought for, the future I'd envisioned for Kelly and me, was slipping away. Just then, I saw Mike across the street, emerging from a pawn shop. Our eyes met, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He knew he had the upper hand. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear and panic gave way to a white-hot rage. I'd let Mike control me for too long, let him make me feel small and worthless. No more. Emily? My lawyer's voice sounded distant. Are you still there? What do you want to do? I watched Mike saunter away, his arrogance palpable even from a distance. My jaw clenched, determination flooding through me. Fight, I said, my voice steel. We fight with everything we've got. I won't let him win. Not this time. As I ended the call, I knew the real battle was just beginning. But for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt truly ready. Mike might think he held all the cards, but he was about to learn that he'd underestimated me for the last time. The bridal shop's bell chimed as Kelly twirled in her wedding gown, her face radiant with joy. My heart swelled with pride and love, momentarily pushing aside the storm of the ongoing divorce battle. "Mom, what do you think?" Kelly asked, her eyes sparkling. I blinked back tears. "You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart." As Kelly changed back into her regular clothes, my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. With trembling fingers, I answered. "Emily, we've hit a snag," he said, his voice grave. "Mike's lawyer is pushing for a larger share of your assets, citing your emotional abuse as grounds for compensation." My stomach dropped. "But that's ridiculous. He's the one who—" "I know," my lawyer cut in, "but they're presenting a compelling case. We need to consider settling, Emily. The longer this drags on, the more you stand to lose." I ended the call, feeling numb. Kelly emerged from the dressing room, her smile fading as she saw my expression. "Mom, what's wrong?" I forced a smile. "Nothing, honey, just some legal stuff." Kelly's eyes narrowed. "Is it Dad? What's he done now?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mike. "We need to talk, for Kelly's sake." I showed Kelly the message, watching her face cloud over. "You're not going to meet him, are you?" she asked. I sighed. "I think I have to, sweetie, for the sake of ending this nightmare." Kelly grabbed my hand. "Then I'm coming with you." An hour later, we sat across from Mike in a quiet corner of a local diner. He looked haggard, his eyes darting between Kelly and me. "Kelly," he began, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry for everything. I want to make things right." Kelly's jaw clenched. "By trying to take everything from Mom? By lying about her in court?" Mike flinched. "It's complicated, honey. Your mother." "Don't you dare," I cut in, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare try to turn her against me." Mike's eyes hardened. "Fine, let's cut to the chase. I want to come to the wedding, Emily. It's my right as her father." Kelly stood up abruptly. "No, absolutely not." "Kelly, please," Mike pleaded. "I know I've made mistakes, but—" "Mistakes?" Kelly's voice rose. "You cheated on Mom with Linda. You gambled away our future. You're trying to destroy Mom in court. Those aren't mistakes, Dad. Those are choices." Mike's face reddened. "Now listen here." "No, you listen," I interjected, finding strength in Kelly's words. "You've made your choices, Mike. Now live with them. You're not coming to the wedding. You're not getting more than you deserve in the divorce, and you're certainly not going to bully us anymore." Mike's hand slammed on the table. "You can't do this to me. I'll fight you every step of the way." "You'll what?" Kelly challenged. "Tell more lies, gamble away more money. Face it, Dad, you've lost, not just the divorce, but us." With that, Kelly stormed out of the diner. I stood to follow her, but Mike grabbed my arm. "Emily, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "Don't let it end like this. We can start over, be a family again." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved. But then I remembered the years of criticism, the affair, the lies. I gently removed his hand. "Goodbye, Mike," I said softly. "I hope you find peace." As I walked out of the diner, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There were still legal hurdles to overcome. But for the first time, I truly believed I would win. Outside, I found Kelly leaning against my car, tears streaming down her face. I pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. Kelly pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm proud of us, Mom. We're going to be okay, aren't we?" I nodded, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay." As we drove home, I realized that this wasn't just about winning the divorce or outsmarting Mike. It was about reclaiming our lives, our happiness. And with Kelly by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. The road ahead might be challenging, but for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it would lead us. The gentle breeze carried the scent of roses as I stood in the garden, watching Kelly and her new husband, James, share their first dance as a married couple. The soft melody of their chosen song drifted through the air, and I found myself swaying slightly, a contented smile on my face. It had been a year since the divorce was finalized, a year of rebuilding and rediscovering myself. The legal battle had been brutal, but in the end, truth prevailed. Mike's lies unraveled in court, and his attempts to paint me as the villain backfired spectacularly. The judge saw through his deceit, and I walked away with a fair settlement and my dignity intact. As the dance ended, Kelly caught my eye and beckoned me over. I made my way through the crowd of well-wishers, accepting hugs and congratulations along the way. "Mom," Kelly beamed, pulling me into a tight embrace. "Can you believe it? I'm married." I laughed, blinking back tears of joy. "I can, sweetheart. You and James are perfect for each other." James grinned, wrapping an arm around Kelly's waist. "We have something for you, Emily," he said, reaching into his pocket. Kelly's eyes sparkled with excitement as James pulled out a small, beautifully wrapped package. "Go on, Mom, open it." With trembling fingers, I unwrapped the gift. Inside was a stunning silk scarf, its vibrant colors shimmering in the late afternoon sun. "It's beautiful," I breathed, running my fingers over the soft fabric. Kelly stepped forward, gently taking the scarf and draping it around my shoulders. "We wanted you to have something special," she said softly. "Something to remind you how beautiful and strong you are." I touched the scarf, feeling a lump form in my throat. For so long, I had let Mike's cruel words about my thinning hair define me. But now, surrounded by love and acceptance, I realized how far I'd come. "Thank you," I whispered, pulling them both into a hug. "This means more than you know." As the reception continued, I found myself by the garden's edge, lost in thought. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the festivities, and I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. "Penny for your thoughts?" a familiar voice asked. I turned to see Carol, my former mother-in-law, standing beside me. Our relationship had been strained during the divorce, but we'd found our way back to each other in the months that followed. "Just thinking about how much has changed," I replied honestly. Carol nodded, her eyes kind. "You've come so far, Emily. I hope you know how proud we all are of you." I smiled, touching the scarf around my neck. "I'm proud of myself, too. For the first time in years, I feel free." As if on cue, the band struck up a lively tune. Carol grinned, holding out her hand. "Care to dance?" Laughing, I took her hand and let her lead me to the dance floor. As we twirled and swayed, I caught sight of Kelly and James, their faces alight with love and joy. My heart swelled with hope for their future, a future free from the pain and doubt that had clouded my own marriage. Later, as the night wound down and guests began to depart, Kelly found me once more. "Mom," she said, her voice soft and serious, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for showing me what real strength looks like." I cupped her face in my hands, overwhelmed with love for this incredible young woman. "Oh, Kelly, you've been my strength through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." As we embraced, I realized that this wasn't just Kelly's new beginning. It was mine, too. The road ahead was full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, I was excited to explore them. The last of the guests departed, leaving just our closest family and friends. As we gathered to see Kelly and James off on their honeymoon, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The scarf around my neck fluttered in the breeze, a reminder of the love and support that surrounded me. Looking up at the star-filled sky, I made a silent wish for Kelly's marriage, for love, respect, and the strength to weather any storm. And as I watched the newlyweds drive away, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The chapter of my life with Mike had closed, but a new one was just beginning. And this time, I was the author of my own story. The sound of shattering glass jolted me from my reverie. I stood frozen, staring at the remains of Mark's favorite crystal tumbler scattered across the kitchen floor. For a moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat, thundering in my ears. "Lily, what the hell was that?" Mark's voice boomed from the living room. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I reached for the broom. "It's nothing, dear. Just dropped a glass." Mark appeared in the doorway, his face twisted in a scowl. "Nothing. That was my grandfather's tumbler. How could you be so careless? I bit my lip, fighting back tears. This wasn't the Mark I had fallen in love with 20 years ago. That Mark would have helped me clean up, maybe even laughed about it. This Mark, I hardly recognized him anymore. I'm sorry, I whispered, avoiding his gaze as I swept up the shards. He let out an exasperated sigh. You're always sorry, Lily. Maybe if you paid more attention to what you were doing instead of daydreaming all the time, these things wouldn't happen. I wanted to argue, to remind him of all the times I'd carefully tended to his precious belongings, but I knew it would only make things worse. Instead, I nodded silently and continued cleaning. And speaking of paying attention, Mark continued, his voice dripping with disdain, have you even bothered to check on my mother today? I froze mid-sweep. Clara, but I thought you were going to. I asked you to do it, Lily. Can't you handle one simple task? The broom clattered to the floor as I straightened up, finally meeting his eyes. Mark, that's not fair. I've been taking care of your mother every day for weeks. You said you'd visit her today. His eyes narrowed. Are you calling me a liar? No, I'm just saying. You know what? He cut me off, his voice rising. If you can't even remember a simple request, how can I trust you to take proper care of my mother? She deserves better than this, Lily. Better than you. His words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the counter for support. How can you say that? I love Clara. I've done everything I can for her. Mark laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound that sent chills down my spine. Everything? Really? Then why did I get a call from her doctor today saying she missed her appointment, an appointment you were supposed to take her to? My mind raced. The appointment. How could I have forgotten? I must have mixed up the dates. I'll call and reschedule right away. Don't bother, Mark spat. I'll take care of it myself. Clearly, I can't rely on you for anything important. As he stormed out of the kitchen, I sank to the floor, heedless of the remaining glass shards. How had we come to this? Where was the man who had once looked at me with such love and admiration? The ringing of my cell phone startled me out of my misery. I fumbled to answer it, grateful for the distraction. Lily, are you okay? It was Faith, my oldest friend, her voice laced with concern. I took a shaky breath. Faith, I don't know what to do anymore. Mark, he's not the same man I married. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Lily, listen to me. You need to get out of there. Come stay with me for a while. We'll figure this out together. As I listened to Faith's words, a small spark of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe it was time to stop making excuses. Maybe it was time to fight back. Okay, I whispered, my resolve strengthening with each word. I'll be there soon. Little did I know, as I hung up the phone and began to pack a bag, that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change my life forever. I woke up on Faith's lumpy couch, disoriented and groggy. For a blissful moment, I forgot why I was there. Then reality came crashing back, and I felt the familiar knot tighten in my stomach. Morning, sleepyhead, Faith chirped, bustling into the living room with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. How'd you sleep? I sat up, gratefully accepting the coffee. As well as can be expected, I guess. Thanks again for letting me stay. Faith waved off my gratitude. That's what friends are for. Now what's the game plan? I sighed, staring into my mug. I don't know, Faith. I can't just abandon Clara. She needs me. And what about what you need, Lily? Faith's voice was gentle but firm. You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Mark's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Where the hell are you? Mark's voice was a mixture of anger and panic. I've been calling all night. I'm at Faith's, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I needed some space to think. Think? What's there to think about? Get home now. My mother needs you. I felt a spark of defiance ignite in my chest. No, Mark, I'm not coming home right now. We need to talk about how things have been. Are you serious? He cut me off. You're abandoning my sick mother because you need to think? I always knew you were selfish, Lily, but this is a new low. His words stung, but I held my ground. That's not fair, Mark. I've been taking care of Clara for months. I just need a little time. Time? He scoffed. Fine. Take your time, but don't expect to waltz back in here like nothing happened. And don't bother calling Clara. I'll tell her you've abandoned us both. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, tears welling up in my eyes. Faith gently took the phone from my hand. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." I wiped my eyes, a mix of anger and determination rising within me. "No, I'm done being sorry. I'm going to see Clara myself." An hour later, I stood outside Clara's door, my heart pounding. I knocked softly. "Come in," Clara's weak voice called out. I entered to find her propped up in bed, looking pale but alert. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Lily, Mark said you'd left." "No, Clara," I said, sitting beside her. "I just needed a little break. I would never abandon you." Clara reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I know that, dear. I've seen how hard you work, how much you care. Don't let Mark make you doubt yourself." I felt tears threatening again. "But I forgot your doctor's appointment. I've been so scattered lately." "Hush," Clara interrupted. "We all make mistakes. The question is, why has my son been making you feel so terrible about yours?" I looked at her, startled by her directness. I don't know. He's changed so much, Clara. I barely recognize him anymore." Clara's eyes narrowed. "I've noticed it too. There's something he's not telling us, Lily. I can feel it." Just then, we heard the front door open. Mark's voice called out, "Mom, are you awake?" Clara squeezed my hand. "Don't let him bully you, dear. Stand your ground." As Mark's footsteps approached, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. Whatever secrets Mark was hiding, whatever storm was brewing, I knew I had to be strong. For myself, for Clara, and for the woman I used to be. The bedroom door swung open, and Mark froze in the doorway, his eyes darting between Clara and me. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. This was it, the moment of truth, and I was ready to face it head-on. The tension in Clara's bedroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark's eyes darted between Clara and me, his jaw clenching visibly. "What are you doing here?" he growled, his gaze fixed on me. I straightened my spine, drawing strength from Clara's warm hand in mine. "I'm visiting Clara, Mark. She's important to me, too." Clara's voice, though soft, carried a steely undertone. "Mark, dear, why don't you join us? We were just having a lovely chat." Mark hesitated, then reluctantly entered the room. He perched on the edge of a chair, his posture rigid. "Mom, you should be resting. Lily shouldn't be bothering you." "Nonsense," Clara retorted. "Lily's presence is a comfort, not a bother. In fact, been meaning to talk to you both." I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach. Clara's tone suggested this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. "What is it, Mom?" Mark asked, a hint of worry creeping into his voice. Clara took a deep breath. "I've been watching you two, and I can't stay silent any longer. Mark, the way you've been treating Lily, it's not right." Mark's face flushed red. "Mom, you don't understand." "I understand more than you think," Clara interrupted. "I've seen the way you speak to her, the way you belittle her efforts. It reminds me of your father." The room fell silent. Mark's father had been a sore subject for years, his abusive behavior a dark cloud over Clara's past. "I'm nothing like him," Mark whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. I squeezed Clara's hand, overwhelmed by her support. "Clara, you don't have to." "I do, Lily." She insisted. "I won't stand by and watch history repeat itself. Mark, you need to take a hard look at your behavior. And Lily, you need to stand up for yourself." Mark stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured." As he stormed towards the door, Clara called out, "Mark, there's something else you need to know." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "What?" Clara's voice was steady, but I could feel her hand trembling in mine. "I'm changing my will. I won't have my money used to support the mistreatment of others." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark turned slowly, his face a mask of shock and anger. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," Clara replied. "Unless things change, I'll be leaving everything to charity." Mark's eyes narrowed, darting between Clara and me. "This is your doing, isn't it?" he snarled at me. "You've poisoned her against me." I stood facing him squarely. "No, Mark, you've done this all on your own." He advanced towards me, his fists clenched. For a moment I thought he might strike me, but Clara's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Mark, don't you dare!" He froze, then spun on his heel and stormed out of the room. The front door slammed moments later, shaking the house. I sank back onto the bed, my legs weak. Clara pulled me into a hug, her frail arms surprisingly strong. "I'm so proud of you, Lily," she whispered. but I'm afraid this is just the beginning. As I held on to Clara, my mind raced. What would Mark do now? How far would he go to protect his inheritance? And most importantly, how would I find the strength to stand my ground in the face of his anger? Clara's words echoed in my mind. This was just the beginning. A storm was coming, and I needed to be ready. As I sat there, comforted by Clara's embrace, I made a silent vow. No matter what happened next, I wouldn't let Mark break me. It was time to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my future. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake. I fumbled for it in the darkness, my heart racing as I saw Mark's name on the screen. "Lily, it's Mom." Mark's voice was tight with panic. "She's had a stroke. We're at the hospital." I was out of bed and throwing on clothes before he finished speaking. "I'm on my way." The drive to the hospital was a blur. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. When I arrived, I found Mark pacing in the waiting room, his face ashen. "Where is she?" I demanded. "They're running tests," he replied, his voice hollow. "It's bad, Lily. They're not sure if she'll—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Despite everything, my heart ached for him. I reached out, touching his arm gently. "She's strong, Mark. She'll pull through." Hours passed in tense silence. Finally, a doctor approached us, her expression grave. "Mrs. Henderson is stable, but her condition is serious. She'll need round-the-clock care for the foreseeable future." Mark and I exchanged glances. We both knew what this meant. "We'll move in with her," Mark said decisively. "We can take care of her at home." I nodded, pushing aside my reservations. Clara needed us, and that was all that mattered right now. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. We packed up our essentials and moved into Clara's spacious house. As we settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the calm before the storm. I was right. "Lily, where's my blue tie?" Mark's irritated voice echoed through the house. "I have an important meeting, and I can't find anything in this mess." I bit back a retort. We'd only been here for 3 days, and Mark was already falling back into old patterns. "I'll find it for you," I called back, forcing my voice to remain calm. As I searched for the tie, I heard Clara's weak voice calling from her bedroom. I rushed to her side, finding her struggling to sit up. "What do you need, Clara?" I asked gently, helping her adjust her pillows. "Just some water, dear," she whispered. As I held the glass to her lips, she caught my hand. "Lily, I need to tell you something important." Before she could continue, Mark burst into the room. "There you are. Did you find my tie?" I turned to him, exasperated. "Mark, your mother needs—" "My tie, Lily," he interrupted. "I'm going to be late." Clara's grip on my hand tightened. "Mark," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "Sit down, both of you." We obeyed, the tension in the room palpable. "I've made a decision," Clara continued. "I'm changing my will again. Lily, I want you to be my primary caregiver, and in return, I'm leaving half of my estate to you." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's face contorted with rage. "You can't be serious," he sputtered. "She's not even family." "She's more family to me than you've been lately," Clara retorted. "This is non-negotiable, Mark." As Mark stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him, I turned to Clara in shock. "Clara, I can't accept this. It's too much." She squeezed my hand. "You can, and you will. You deserve it, Lily. And you're going to need it." "Need it?" I echoed, confused. Clara's eyes met mine, filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "Mark isn't the man we thought he was. There's something you need to know." As Clara began to speak, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was about to change. And I realized, with a mixture of fear and resolve, that I was standing at a crossroads. The decision I made next would shape the rest of my life. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever Clara was about to reveal. "I'm listening," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my heart. I stared at the pile of bills on the kitchen table, my stomach churning. Mark's latest budget cuts had left us scraping by, and I couldn't fathom how we'd manage this month's expenses. "Everything all right, dear?" Clara's gentle voice came from behind me. I quickly shuffled the papers together, forcing a smile. "Just some household accounts, Clara. Nothing to worry about." She wheeled her chair closer, her eyes sharp despite her frail appearance. "Lily, you don't have to hide things from me. I can see you're struggling." I sighed, the weight of our financial troubles pressing down on me. "Mark's been tightening the purse strings lately. I'm just trying to make it all work. Clara's brow furrowed. That doesn't sound like the Mark I know. Has he explained why? Before I could answer, Mark's voice boomed from the hallway. Lily, where's the checkbook? I need to make a withdrawal. I froze, panic rising in my chest. We barely had enough to cover the bills as it was. Mark, wait! He strode into the kitchen, his eyes landing on the scattered papers. What's all this? Just organizing our expenses, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark, we need to talk about the budget. We're barely making ends meet as it is. His face darkened. Are you questioning my financial decisions? I'm doing what's best for this family. Clara interjected, her voice firm despite its weakness. Mark, if there are money troubles, we should discuss them as a family. He whirled on her. Stay out of this, Mom. It doesn't concern you. It does when you're living in my house, Clara shot back. The tension in the room was palpable. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Mark, please, we need to be honest about our situation. Where is all the money going? For a moment, I saw a flicker of something, fear, guilt, in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by anger. I don't have to explain myself to you. Just make it work, Lily. That's your job, isn't it? As he stormed out, slamming the front door behind him, I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. Clara wheeled over, placing a comforting hand on my arm. Lily, there's something you need to know. I've been doing some digging, and I think Mark might be. The shrill ring of the doorbell interrupted her. Wiping my eyes, I went to answer it. A striking blonde woman stood on the porch, her perfectly manicured hand clutching an expensive handbag. Is Mark here? She asked, her eyes darting past me into the house. He just left, I replied, a strange feeling settling in my gut. Can I help you? She hesitated, then thrust an envelope at me. Just give him this. Tell him Lydia stopped by. As she turned to leave, a small velvet box fell from her purse. I picked it up, my heart pounding as I recognized the logo of an exclusive jewelry store. Wait, you dropped. I called out, but she was already speeding away in a sleek sports car. I stumbled back inside, the envelope and box feeling like lead in my hands. Clara took one look at my face and wheeled herself over. Lily, what's wrong? With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a receipt for a diamond necklace, worth more than our mortgage payment. The date on it was last week, when Mark had claimed he couldn't afford to pay for Clara's new medication. Oh, Lily, Clara breathed, her eyes filled with sorrow. I'm so sorry. I suspected, but I didn't want to believe. The pieces were falling into place. The budget cuts, the secretive phone calls, the late nights at the office. My world was crumbling around me. I looked at Clara, tears streaming down my face. What do I do now? She grasped my hand firmly. You fight, Lily. You fight for yourself, for your dignity, and for the life you deserve. In that moment, standing in Clara's kitchen with evidence of my husband's betrayal in my hands, I made a decision. No more excuses, no more turning a blind eye. It was time to take control of my life, no matter the cost. You're right, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. It's time to fight back. The weeks following my discovery of Mark's affair were a blur of silent meals, tense conversations, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into caring for Clara, desperate for any distraction from the crumbling ruins of my marriage. One particularly trying afternoon, as I was helping Clara with her physical therapy, Mark stormed into the room, his face thunderous. Lily, we need to talk. Now. I exchanged a worried glance with Clara before following Mark to the study. He slammed the door behind us, making me flinch. Care to explain this? He thrust a piece of paper at me. It was a bank statement, showing a series of small withdrawals I'd been making. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I've been putting some money aside, for emergencies. Mark's eyes narrowed. Emergencies? Or are you planning to leave me? Mark, please, I began, but he cut me off. I knew it. You're stealing from me, plotting behind my back. Just like... He stopped abruptly, but I caught the slip. Just like who, Mark? Lydia? The color drained from his face. How do you know about Lydia? She came by the house, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Dropped off a receipt for a very expensive necklace. Funny how you can afford that, but not your mother's medication. Mark's shock quickly turned to rage. He advanced on me, backing me against the wall. You had no right to go through my things. And you had no right to betray our marriage. I shot back, finding a well of courage I didn't know I possessed. Just then we heard a crash from Clara's room. We both rushed out to find her on the floor, her wheelchair overturned. "Mom!" Mark cried, helping her up. "What happened?" Clara's eyes met mine, and I saw a glimmer of something there. Determination, maybe even a hint of mischief. I was trying to reach my book. I'm sorry, I should have called for help." As Mark fussed over her, I noticed Clara slip something into my hand. It was a small key. "Third drawer in my dresser," she whispered. "Quick, while he's distracted." Heart pounding, I slipped away to Clara's room. The key fit perfectly into the lock of the third drawer. Inside, I found a thick folder labeled Mark Financials. I flipped it open, my eyes widening at what I saw. Bank statements, investment reports, even offshore account details, all showing far more money than Mark had ever admitted to having. And worse, evidence of large sums being funneled into an account under Lydia's name. "Oh, Mark," I whispered, my heart breaking all over again. "Lily, where are you?" Mark's voice echoed down the hallway. I quickly locked the drawer and hurried back to Clara's room, my mind reeling. "There you are," Mark said, eyeing me suspiciously. "Where did you go?" "Just getting a glass of water," I lied, avoiding his gaze. Clara spoke up, her voice weak but determined. "Mark, I think I need to go to the hospital. I'm not feeling well." The next few hours were a whirlwind of ambulance rides and emergency room visits. As we sat in the waiting room, Clara's words from earlier echoed in my mind. "You fight, Lily. You fight for yourself." I looked at Mark, slumped in his chair, his face a mask of worry and guilt. I thought of the folder hidden in Clara's drawer, of Lydia and her diamond necklace, of all the lies and betrayals. In that moment, I made a decision. I would fight, not just for myself, but for Clara and for the life I deserved. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, I would reclaim my dignity and my future. As the doctor approached us with news of Clara's condition, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Little did I know, the true test of my resolve was yet to come. The shrill ring of the phone pierced the pre-dawn silence. I fumbled for it, my heart already racing. "Hello? Mrs. Henderson?" An unfamiliar voice. "This is Mercy Hospital. I'm afraid there's been a complication with your mother-in-law." The world tilted on its axis. "We'll be right there," I managed to choke out. I shook Mark awake, and we rushed to the hospital in tense silence. The halls were a blur as we followed a solemn-faced nurse to Clara's room. We were too late. "I'm so sorry," the doctor said softly. "We did everything we could." Mark collapsed into a chair, his face ashen. I stood frozen, unable to process the reality before me. Clara, my rock, my confidant, was gone. The next few days passed in a haze of grief and frantic preparations. I threw myself into arranging the funeral, desperate for any distraction from the gaping hole in my heart. On the day of the wake, I stood beside Mark, accepting condolences from a sea of unfamiliar faces. His hand on my back felt like a lead weight. "Such a tragedy," I overheard one of Mark's aunts whispering. "And to think if she'd been getting proper care at home." I stiffened, feeling Mark's grip tighten painfully on my waist. "What exactly are you implying, Aunt Marge?" Mark's voice was low, dangerous. The older woman sniffed. "Well, if Lily had been more attentive, perhaps." "How dare you?" I interrupted, my voice shaking with fury. "I did everything for Clara. Everything!" Mark pulled me aside roughly. "Lily, calm down. You're making a scene." "A scene?" I hissed. "Your aunt is practically accusing me of killing Clara, and you're worried about appearances?" His eyes narrowed. "Well, if you'd been home instead of out God knows where." "I was grocery shopping," I exploded. "Because you cut off access to our accounts, remember? I had to scrimp and save just to keep food on the table while you were off buying jewelry for your mistress." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Mark's face contorted with rage. "You vindictive bitch," he snarled. "How dare you bring that up here now?" "Mark!" His father's voice boomed across the room. "What is the meaning of this?" As Mark turned to face his father, I saw Lydia slip out of the room, her face pale. I made to follow her, but Faith appeared at my side, gripping my arm. "Lily, don't," she whispered urgently. "This isn't the time or place." I sagged against her, suddenly exhausted. "You're right. I can't do this anymore, Faith." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Then don't. You've got the evidence Clara left you, right? Use it. End this, once and for all." I took a deep breath, straightening my spine. She was right. It was time to fight back. As I turned back to the room, I saw Mark engaged in a heated argument with his father. Our eyes met across the crowded space, and I saw a flicker of fear in his gaze. He knew I had the power to destroy him now. I made my way towards them, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. This ends now, I thought. But before I could reach them, a commotion erupted near the casket. Mark's brother was on his knees, clutching a piece of paper and sobbing. "What is it?" Mark's father demanded. "Thomas, what's wrong?" Thomas looked up, his face a mask of shock and grief. It's Mom's will. She changed it. She left everything to Lily." The room erupted into chaos. I stood frozen, feeling all eyes turned to me. Mark's face was a storm of fury and disbelief. In that moment, I realized the true battle was just beginning. Clara had given me the ultimate weapon, but at what cost? As accusations and questions flew around me, I steeled myself for the fight ahead. For Clara, for myself, I would see this through to the bitter end. The tension in the lawyer's office was palpable as we gathered for the reading of Clara's will. Mark sat across from me, his jaw clenched, while his family huddled together, shooting daggers in my direction. Faith squeezed my hand reassuringly as Clara's lawyer, Mr. Jameson, cleared his throat. "Before we begin," Mr. Jameson said, "Mrs. Henderson left a letter to be read aloud." He pulled out an envelope and began to read. "My dear family, if you're hearing this, I'm no longer with you, but I hope my final act will bring the truth to light and right some wrongs. Lily, you've been more of a daughter to me than I could have ever hoped for. Mark, my son, I love you, but I cannot condone your actions any longer." Mark's face paled as Mr. Jameson continued, detailing Mark's infidelity, financial manipulations, and emotional abuse. With each revelation, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Clara had known. She had seen everything. "And so," Mr. Jameson concluded, "Mrs. Henderson has left her entire estate to Lily with one condition, that she use it to build a new life for herself, free from the constraints and abuse she has endured." The room erupted into chaos. Mark lunged across the table, his face contorted with rage. "You manipulative bitch," he snarled. "You turned my own mother against me." I stood my ground, meeting his gaze steadily. "No, Mark, you did that all on your own." His father intervened, pulling Mark back. "Is this true?" he demanded. "Everything in that letter?" Mark's silence was all the confirmation needed. His Aunt Marge burst into tears while his brother Thomas looked on in disgust. As the family argued amongst themselves, I turned to Mr. Jameson. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked quietly. He nodded, handing me a thick folder. "Financial records, Mrs. Henderson. Enough evidence to ensure a very favorable divorce settlement should you choose that path." I clutched the folder to my chest, feeling a surge of gratitude for Clara's foresight and love. I looked at Mark, the man I had once loved, now a stranger consumed by greed and bitterness. "Mark," I said, my voice steady, "I want a divorce." He laughed bitterly. "You think you've won, don't you? You've got nothing without me. You're nothing without me." I shook my head, feeling a newfound strength coursing through me. "No, Mark, I'm everything without you. I'm free." As I turned to leave, Lydia burst into the room, her face tear-stained. "Mark, I'm pregnant," she blurted out. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Mark, saw the panic in his eyes, and felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just a profound sense of relief. "Congratulations," I said softly. "I hope you'll be a better father than you were a husband." With that, I walked out of the office, out of my old life, and into a future bright with possibility. Faith fell into step beside me, grinning from ear to ear. "So what now?" she asked. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm California sun on my face. Now? Now I live, Faith. For the first time in years, I truly live." As we drove away, I thought of Clara, of her strength and wisdom. She had given me more than just financial security. She had given me the courage to reclaim my life. In the months that followed, I used Clara's inheritance to start a foundation, helping women escape abusive relationships. I found purpose in my work, joy in my newfound freedom, and peace in the knowledge that I had survived and thrived. Mark's attempts to contest the will fell flat in the face of the evidence Clara had gathered. Our divorce was finalized quickly, leaving him with far less than he'd hoped for. As I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sunset over the city, I raised a glass to Clara's memory. "Thank you," I whispered to the wind, "for everything." The future stretched out before me, full of promise and possibility. I was no longer Mark's wife, no longer a victim. I was Lily, strong, resilient, and finally, gloriously free.
The old brass key felt wrong in my hand as I approached Marissa's storage shed. 6 months since the funeral, and I still couldn't bring myself to clear out her things. But today was different. Today, I needed to find Mom's antique music box, the one thing Lila had asked for since moving in with me. A gust of autumn wind rustled the overgrown garden, sending dead leaves skittering across my path. The padlock clicked open on the third try, the door's hinges protesting with a long, mournful creak. "Grandma?" The whisper was so faint I almost missed it. I froze, my hand still on the door handle. That couldn't be Lila's voice. She was at school. I dropped her off myself this morning. "Grandma, please." My heart stopped. The voice came from the darkest corner of the shed, behind stacked moving boxes and old furniture. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, hands trembling as I swept the beam across the cluttered space. The light caught a flash of purple fabric, Lila's favorite sweater. She was huddled against the wall, her small wrists bound with zip ties to an old radiator pipe. "Oh God, Lila." I rushed forward, knocking over boxes in my panic. "Baby, who did this to you?" She flinched when I touched her, then collapsed against me, sobbing. Her skin felt ice cold, her dark hair matted with dirt. "How long had she been here?" Daddy said. She choked out between sobs, said I had to stay quiet. Like Mommy did. The world tilted sideways. Like Mommy did. Marissa's accident 6 months ago, the fall down the basement stairs that never made sense, suddenly crystallized into something far more sinister. "When did your father bring you here?" I worked at the zip ties with shaking fingers, trying to keep my voice steady. "After school yesterday," he said. Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said I was being bad like Mommy." The zip ties finally snapped. I gathered Lila into my arms, her small body trembling against mine. She felt lighter than I remembered, her collarbones sharp under my fingers. "Has this happened before, sweetheart?" She nodded against my shoulder. "Sometimes. When I make Daddy mad. Or when I tell about the mean lady who visits." "Mean lady?" I filed that away, forcing myself to focus on getting Lila to safety. My mind raced through options: hospital first, then police. Document everything. But most importantly, keep her away from Trent. As I carried her out of the shed, my phone buzzed. Trent's name lit up the screen along with his text. "Taking Lila to dinner tonight. Be there at 6 to pick her up." He didn't know. He had no idea I'd found her. I looked down at my granddaughter, at the angry red marks on her wrists and the fear still lingering in her eyes. The same eyes as Marissa's, eyes that must have held similar fear in those final months. "It's okay now," I whispered, but the words felt hollow. Nothing about this was okay. My daughter was dead, her husband was a monster, and I'd been blind to it all. But not anymore. I held Lila closer as we walked to my car, each step cementing my resolve. Trent would pay for what he'd done, to my granddaughter, to my daughter, to our family. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The game he'd been playing was about to change. He just didn't know it yet. The emergency room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Lila's face as the doctor examined her wrists. I sat nearby, clutching my phone, waiting for Trent's inevitable call. The hospital staff had already documented everything: the bruises, the malnutrition, the rope burns. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in Trent's coffin. My phone buzzed. "Not Trent, Finn." "Mom? What's going on?" The school called saying Lila never showed up today. I stepped into the hallway, keeping one eye on Lila through the door. I found her in Marissa's storage shed. "Trent." My voice cracked. "He left her there overnight." Silence crackled across the line. Then, "I'm on my way. Don't let that bastard anywhere near her." As if summoned by Finn's words, Trent's voice boomed down the corridor. "Where's my daughter? I'm her father. I have every right to see her." I turned to see him striding toward me, all polished corporate charm in his tailored suit. The same suit he'd worn to Marissa's funeral. Behind him stood a woman I didn't recognize, her sleek blonde hair and designer clothes screaming executive. Something about her presence made my skin crawl. "Eleanor." Trent's smile didn't reach his eyes. What's this about? The school called, saying Lila was absent. Cut the act, I snapped. I found her in the shed, tied up, like you left her. The blonde woman's eyes widened slightly before her face smoothed back to neutral. Trent didn't miss a beat. That's ridiculous. Lila's been acting out lately, making up stories, just like her mother used to. He lowered his voice. All concern. I've been meaning to talk to you about getting her some help. The casual mention of Marissa sent rage coursing through me. Like the help you got my daughter? Mrs. Blake, the blonde woman stepped forward. I'm Callie Rivers, Trent's colleague. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere private? For Lila's sake. A memory surfaced, Marissa's voice on the phone, 3 weeks before her death. He's always working late with this woman from the office. Says I'm paranoid for asking questions. You. I met Callie's carefully neutral gaze. You're the mean lady Lila mentioned. Color drained from Callie's face. Trent's hand tightened on her arm, a gesture I recognized from countless photos of him with Marissa. Always controlling, always possessing. Mom. Finn's voice cut through the tension as he rounded the corner. He positioned himself between me and Trent, his shoulders tight with barely contained fury. Mr. Calloway. A police detective appeared behind us, flanked by 2 officers. We need to ask you some questions about your daughter's injuries. Trent's mask slipped for just a moment, long enough for me to see the rage beneath. This is a misunderstanding. Eleanor's clearly upset imagining things. Grief can do that to people. The evidence isn't imaginary, I said quietly. Neither are the videos from Marissa's phone. I was bluffing. I hadn't found any videos yet. But Trent's slight flinch told me they existed somewhere. Callie's hand twitched toward her purse before she caught herself. We should go, she murmured to Trent. Call your lawyer. As the police led Trent away, I caught a glimpse of Lila watching from her hospital room. She looked so much like Marissa in that moment, the same quiet strength beneath the fear. I hadn't protected Marissa, but I would protect Lila, even if it meant burning Trent's whole world down to do it. Mom, Finn touched my shoulder. What videos was that about? I don't know yet, I admitted. But Trent's reaction just told us where to start looking. Marissa's laptop sat on my kitchen table like a time bomb. After 3 days of Lila in the hospital, Child Protective Services interviews, and temporary custody arrangements, I finally had a moment to search for those videos I'd bluffed about. Finn had managed to crack Marissa's password, her wedding date, of all things. Found something. Finn called from the living room where he was going through a box of Marissa's papers. Bank statements. Look at these transfers. I opened the first video file I found instead. Marissa's face filled the screen, her eyes wide with fear. If anything happens to me, she whispered, it wasn't an accident. Trent's been. The recording cut off. The timestamp showed 3 days before her death. My hands shook as I opened another file. This one showing Trent and Callie in Marissa's home office, arguing in hushed voices while Marissa recorded from the hallway. The money's gone, Trent, Callie hissed. The board meeting's in 2 weeks. When they audit, they won't find anything. Trent cut her off. Marissa's company will take the fall. I've already planted the evidence. The phone rang, startling me. Unknown number. Mrs. Blake. A woman's voice, familiar but unexpected. This is Callie Rivers. We need to talk. I think we said everything we needed to at the hospital. Please. Her voice cracked. I have information about Marissa's death. But, Trent, he's watching me. Can you meet me at the Riverside Cafe in an hour? I glanced at Finn, who was still absorbed in the financial documents. Why should I trust you? Because I made a mistake getting involved with Trent. Because I didn't know about Lila. And because... She paused. Because I'm pregnant, and I'm terrified. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. Callie sat in a corner booth, her designer outfit replaced by jeans and an oversized sweater. A bruise peeked out from under her collar. He's losing control, she said before I could speak. The company's investigating financial irregularities. He blamed Marissa's company for the missing funds, but it was him. When she found out, he killed her. Callie flinched. I thought it was an accident. I swear I did. But then I found this. She slid a USB drive across the table. Security footage from their house. The night she died. My phone buzzed, a text from Finn. Mom, get home now. Trent's here. I have to go. I stood abruptly. My son. Wait. Callie grabbed my arm. There's more. The board meeting tomorrow. He's planning to. The cafe's window exploded inward. Callie screamed, shoving me down as glass rained around us. Through the chaos, I glimpsed a dark SUV speeding away. He knows, Callie whispered, blood trickling from a cut on her cheek. Oh God, he knows I talked to you. I helped her up, my mind racing. Finn was alone with Trent at my house. Lila was safe at least, still in the hospital under guard. Come with me, I said. We'll need your testimony. She shook her head, backing away. I can't. The baby, I have to think about. Callie. I caught her arm, feeling the tremors running through her body. You're already in this. Help me stop him, or he'll destroy you too, just like he destroyed Marissa. For a moment, I saw the same fear in her eyes that I'd seen in my daughter's video. Then something harder took its place. Okay, she whispered, but we have to hurry. The board meeting isn't just about money. He's going to frame Marissa's company for corporate espionage. Once those documents are filed, then we'll stop him before he gets the chance. I pulled out my phone to call Finn. It's time to end this. My tires screeched as I pulled into my driveway, Callie clutching the dashboard beside me. Through the front window, I could see Finn and Trent in what looked like a calm conversation, but Finn's clenched fists told a different story. Stay here, I told Callie, but she was already opening her door. He'll be more controlled if I'm there, she said. He won't want me to see. The sentence hung unfinished, heavy with implications about what Trent was capable of. Inside, Trent sat in my favorite armchair like he owned it, while Finn stood rigid by the fireplace. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Eleanor, Trent smiled, all warmth and concern. I was just telling Finn about my plans to seek full custody of Lila. Given recent events, I'm worried about your mental state. Recent events like leaving your daughter tied up in a shed? Finn's voice cracked with rage. Allegations that will be thoroughly discredited. Trent waved his hand dismissively, then froze as Callie stepped into view. Something dark flickered across his face. What's she doing here? Telling the truth, Callie said, but her voice trembled. About everything. Trent stood slowly, straightening his jacket. Careful, Callie. Think about your future. Our future. I saw the security footage. I cut in. From the night Marissa died. His expression didn't change, but his left hand twitched, the same tell I'd noticed at poker nights years ago, when he was bluffing. What footage? The cameras you didn't know about, Callie said. The ones Marissa installed after she caught us. After she knew something was wrong. Trent moved with startling speed, grabbing Callie's arm. Finn lunged forward, but Trent already had his phone out. One call, he said quietly, and certain documents go public. Documents that show Marissa's company stealing corporate secrets. Documents that would destroy her legacy and leave Lila with nothing. Those documents are fake, I said, but uncertainty gnawed at me. How much damage could he do, even with lies? Does it matter? His grip on Callie tightened. The scandal would follow Lila forever. Is that what you want? To destroy your granddaughter's future in some misguided quest for revenge? It's not about revenge, I said, but the words felt hollow. Wasn't that exactly what I wanted? To make him pay? Lila's face flashed in my mind, not scared and hurt in the shed, but laughing at the park last summer, Marissa pushing her on the swings. What would justice mean for her? Let her go. Finn took another step forward. Or I swear. Or what? Trent's smile turned cruel. You'll add assault charges to your mother's growing list of problems? Face it, Eleanor. You've lost. Take the deal. Drop everything. Let me handle Lila's future and we all walk away. I pulled out my phone, fingers hovering over the screen. You're right about one thing. This ends now. I pressed play. Marissa's voice filled the room, If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. Trent's been. The recording cut off just like before, but it was enough. Trent's mask slipped, revealing something desperate and dangerous underneath. That proves nothing, he snarled, but his grip on Callie loosened. No, I agreed. But the security footage will. And the financial records. And Callie's testimony. The question is, how much are you willing to lose before you realize you've already lost everything? The silence stretched taut as a wire. In it, I heard Marissa's voice again, not from the recording, but from memory. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. I met Trent's eyes. So, what's it going to be? Detective Sarah Chin set a stack of photos on my kitchen table, spreading them out like a macabre deck of cards. Security footage stills from Marissa's house, financial documents, and images from Lila's hospital examination. We have enough to arrest him, she said, but making the charges stick will be harder. His legal team is already trying to paint me as unstable. I finished, pushing away a photo of Lila's bruised wrists, and threatening to destroy Marissa's company reputation. Finn paced behind us, phone pressed to his ear. Yeah, I understand the board's concerns, but if you just look at the documentation. He caught my eye, shaking his head. Trent's lies were already taking root. My phone buzzed, a text from Callie. Meeting moved up to tonight. Trent's making his move early. I can't stall him anymore. There's something else, Detective Chin said quietly. We found evidence of previous incidents. Other women, before Marissa. The words hit like a physical blow. What kind of incidents? Similar patterns. Successful women who suddenly lost everything. Their companies, reputations, sometimes their lives. All ruled accidents or suicides. Finn ended his call. Mom, we've got another problem. Trent's lawyers are filing for emergency custody of Lila. They're claiming you orchestrated this whole thing to damage his reputation. The room tilted sideways. I gripped the table edge, my knuckles white. He can't, after what he did. He can try, Detective Chin said. And he has friends in high places. Another text from Callie. He knows I helped you. Says he'll make sure I lose the baby if I testify. The pieces clicked together. Trent's pattern, his confidence, the way he'd always stayed just ahead of consequences. He didn't just hurt people. He destroyed them completely. The board meeting, I said suddenly. What if we could prove the financial fraud before he frames Marissa's company? We'd need access to his private servers, Detective Chin replied. And authorization from. I have his passwords. Callie's voice came from the doorway. We all turned. She stood there, pale but determined, one hand protectively over her stomach. All of them. And I'm ready to testify. It's dangerous, I warned. He'll come after you. He already is. She moved closer, laying a USB drive on the table. But I won't let him destroy another family. I owe Marissa that much. Finn checked his watch. The meeting's in 3 hours. Even with the passwords, downloading and analyzing that much data. Then we work fast, Detective Chin said, already pulling out her phone. I'll get my cyber team. A crash from outside cut her off. Through the window, I saw 2 men in dark suits approaching the house. Trent's private security. Back door, Detective Chin ordered, drawing her weapon. Now. As we moved, I grabbed Marissa's laptop and the USB drive. We had one chance to expose everything, the fraud, the abuse, the deaths he'd caused. One chance to ensure Lila's safety and Marissa's justice. Mom. Finn grabbed my arm as we slipped out the back. Whatever happens next, we're in this together. I thought of Marissa's final video, her voice trembling but determined. Of Lila in that shed, still brave despite everything. Of all the other women who'd faced Trent's wrath alone. Together, I agreed, clutching the evidence that could save or destroy us all. But we finished this tonight. The sound of breaking glass echoed from inside the house. As we ran, I silently promised Marissa that her death wouldn't be in vain. Trent had spent years building his house of cards. Time to watch it burn. The corporate boardroom loomed before me, all glass and steel and money. Detective Chen's cyber team had worked miracles with Callie's passwords, but we were cutting it close. Too close. He's already inside, Finn whispered, checking his phone. With the board and his lawyers. I clutched the flash drive containing everything, the security footage, financial records, Marissa's videos. My entire case against Trent, compressed into a tiny piece of metal and plastic. Mrs. Blake. A security guard approached. Mr. Calloway is expecting you. Of course he was. He'd probably orchestrated this whole moment, letting me get this far just to watch me fail. The boardroom doors opened. Trent sat at the head of the table, surrounded by stern-faced executives and sharp-suited lawyers. His smile hadn't changed since Marissa's funeral. Practiced, perfect, poisonous. Eleanor, he stood, all concern and warmth. I'm so glad you came. We were just discussing Marissa's company's unfortunate situation. You mean the situation you created? I moved to plug the flash drive into the presentation system, but one of the lawyers cleared his throat. Before we proceed, he said, I should inform you that sharing potentially stolen corporate data would constitute a criminal act. Trent's smile widened. We're only trying to protect you, Eleanor. Your recent behavior, the false accusations, the harassment of my staff, the attempted kidnapping of my daughter. Kidnapping? My voice cracked. She was chained in a shed on property you broke into. Another lawyer interjected. After making numerous threats against Mr. Calloway. The room spun slightly. They had twisted everything, turned every piece of evidence against me. And the board members were nodding, buying every word. Play the security footage, Finn demanded, but Trent held up his hand. Ah, yes, the mysterious footage that supposedly shows me. He paused dramatically. Doing what exactly? Because our technical team found only edited clips, manipulated dates. Really, Eleanor, fraud doesn't suit you. My phone buzzed. Detective Chun. Evidence tampering at the station. Original files corrupted. Callie missing. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. He got into everything, the evidence, the witnesses, even the police files. Now, Trent continued smoothly. Given your emotional state, I'm prepared to be generous. Drop these ridiculous allegations, sign over temporary custody of Lila while you seek help, and we can avoid pressing charges. You killed her, I whispered. You killed Marissa. Your daughter's death was a tragic accident, he said softly, his eyes hard. Don't dishonor her memory with these paranoid fantasies. The board members shifted uncomfortably. I could see it in their faces. They saw me as the unstable one, the grieving mother who'd lost touch with reality. Mom. Finn touched my arm. We need to go. Now. One more thing, Trent added as we turned to leave. The hospital called. Lila's been asking for her father. It would be a shame if your issues prevented those visits. The threat hung in the air, clear as crystal. He would use Lila to control me, just like he'd controlled Marissa. In that moment, I understood completely why Marissa had felt so hopeless at the end. Trent didn't just destroy evidence. He destroyed reality itself, replacing it with his own version where he was always the hero, always the victim, always in control. Outside the boardroom, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number, with a video attachment. The thumbnail showed Callie, terrified but alive, holding up today's newspaper. I have proof, the message read. The real proof. But we only have one chance to use it. I stared at the phone, then at Finn, thinking of Lila in that shed, of Marissa's final days, of all the women Trent had destroyed. One chance. It would have to be enough. Callie's proof led us to Marissa's old office building, now mostly empty after hours. Finn kept watch while I followed her directions to the third-floor server room. My phone buzzed with Detective Chen's warning. Trent left the board meeting, moving fast. The server room door was already open. I wondered when you'd figured out. Trent's voice came from the darkness. He stepped into the dim emergency lighting, holding Marissa's old laptop. She always backed everything up here. Paranoid to the end. Where's Callie? Safe. For now. He set the laptop down. You know, Marissa stood right there the night she died, making the same mistakes you're making. Movement behind him caught my eye, a flash of blonde hair. Callie, her face bruised, gesturing frantically at something on the desk beside Trent. She wasn't the first, was she? I kept his attention on me. Detective Chun found the others. All those accidents and suicides. Tragic coincidences. His smile turned sharp, just like what's about to happen here. A grieving mother, unstable after her daughter's death, breaks in to destroy corporate property. Things get out of hand. You really think you can get away with it again? I already have. The board believes me. The police have nothing. Even your precious evidence is corrupted. He stepped closer. It's over, Eleanor. You lost. Maybe. I glanced at Callie again. She had something in her hands now, a small recording device. But Marissa didn't. I pressed play on my phone. Marissa's voice filled the room. If you're watching this, I'm dead. And Trent killed me. His composure cracked. That's not. I found his pattern. Marissa's voice continued. The women, the companies, the fake evidence. I've uploaded everything to a secure server. This is the key. Callie moved suddenly, tossing something small and metallic. I caught it, a USB drive on a familiar chain. Marissa's old necklace. Trent lunged for it, but Finn appeared in the doorway, Detective Chun beside him. It's over, Trent. Nothing's over. He grabbed Callie, using her as a shield. One call, and everything you love disappears. Lila, your reputation, Marissa's legacy. You can't hurt them anymore. Callie's voice shook, but her eyes were steel. I sent copies to everyone. The board, the police, the victims' families. Every single woman you destroyed. The mask finally shattered. Rage transformed his handsome face into something monstrous. He shoved Callie aside, lunging for me with murderous intent. I didn't flinch, didn't run. The taser hit him mid-stride, Detective Chen's aim perfect. He collapsed, twitching, as officers swarmed the room. Mom. Finn rushed to my side. Are you okay? I stared down at Trent, remembering Marissa's smile, Lila's courage, all the lives he'd broken trying to maintain his perfect facade. Your mistake, I told his prone form, was thinking this was about revenge. It was always about justice. For Marissa, for Lila, for all of them. As they led him away, I helped Callie to her feet. Thank you, she whispered, for not giving up. Marissa didn't give up either. I touched the USB drive, still warm from being hidden in the server room all these months. She made sure the truth would come out one way or another. My phone lit up with a text from the hospital. Lila's asking for you. Go, Detective Chin said. We've got enough to put him away for life. Multiple counts of fraud, assault, murder. I left them processing the scene, evidence mounting with every open file. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of hope. Time to go home. Time to heal. Time to show Lila that monsters can be beaten, that truth finds its way to light, and that love, fierce, protective, unrelenting love, is stronger than any darkness. 6 months after Trent's arrest, I stood in Marissa's old office, watching Lila explore the space that would soon become her art room. The company board had transferred ownership back to the family, a small gesture of atonement for their role in Trent's schemes. Grandma, look. Lila held up a dusty photo frame she'd found in a drawer. Marissa's smile beamed from behind the glass, her arms around a younger Lila. Can we put this one up? Of course, sweetheart. I helped her hang it on the freshly painted wall, next to the growing collection of her drawings. The latest showed 3 figures, Lila, me, and Finn, surrounded by bright colors and floating hearts. My phone buzzed. Detective Chen. Trent took the plea deal. Life sentence.
No parole.
Mom. Finn appeared in the doorway. Callie's here. She entered carefully, her baby bump now visible beneath her flowing dress. The board meeting went well, she said. They've agreed to compensate all the families Trent hurt. It won't bring anyone back, but it's a start. I finished. The healing process was different for everyone. Some of Trent's other victims' families had wanted revenge. Others just wanted to forget. We'd chosen to rebuild. Aunt Callie, Lila ran to hug her. The title had started spontaneously a few weeks ago, and nobody had corrected it. Family came in many forms, we'd learned. I found something else, Callie said, pulling out a small USB drive. More videos from Marissa. Personal ones for Lila. When she's older. I took the drive, feeling its weight. More pieces of Marissa to discover. More memories to share. Thank you. There's something else.
Finn shifted uncomfortably.
Remember those offshore accounts Trent had? The forensic accountants found another one. In Lila's name. The implications hung heavy in the air. Blood money, meant to buy silence or loyalty. We'll donate it, I decided. Set up a foundation for domestic violence survivors. In Marissa's name. Lila tugged at my sleeve. Can we make it help kids too? Like me? Especially kids like you. I hugged her close, marveling at her resilience. The nightmares were less frequent now, the therapy helping her understand none of it was her fault. A familiar melody drifted through the office, Marissa's old music box, the one that started this whole journey, playing its bittersweet tune. Lila had placed it on the windowsill, letting afternoon sunlight catch its tarnished surface. You know, Callie said softly, Marissa told me once that revenge wasn't about destroying someone. It was about refusing to let them destroy you. I watched Lila return to her drawing, adding another figure to the family portrait, Marissa, floating above like a guardian angel. She hummed along with the music box, peaceful and present in a way that seemed impossible 6 months ago. We should go, Finn checked his watch. The support group meets in an hour. I nodded, gathering my things. The group had been Callie's idea, bringing together families affected by Trent's crimes, creating strength through shared healing. As we left the office, Lila stopped to straighten the photo of Marissa. Mom's watching us, she said matter-of-factly, making sure we're okay. Yes, she is. I touched the frame gently. And we are okay, aren't we? Lila smiled, Marissa's smile, bright and unbreakable. We're better than okay. We're family. The music box played its final notes as we walked out together, leaving the shadows of the past behind. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but transformed into something stronger. Something that could heal instead of hurt. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better.
The sound of shattering glass jolted me from my stupor. I stood frozen in the doorway of what used to be my kitchen, watching as Brenda, my mother-in-law, hurled another plate against the wall. You useless, barren woman, she shrieked, her face contorted with rage. Look what you've done to my son's life. I flinched as another plate whizzed past my ear. Brenda, please, I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper. This is my home, too. She laughed, a harsh, grating sound that sent chills down my spine. Your home? Not anymore, Laura. You've overstayed your welcome. I searched the room desperately for Mike, my husband of 15 years. He stood in the corner, his face a mask of indifference. Mike, I called out, please say something. He met my gaze, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. But then his eyes hardened, and he turned away. Maybe it's best if you leave for a while, Laura, he muttered, my world tilted on its axis. Leave? But where would I go? Brenda's triumphant cackle filled the air. Oh, I'm sure you'll figure something out. After all, you've been so good at figuring out how to avoid giving my son children. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my stomach. The same stomach that had just 3 years ago carried our child for 6 precious months before tragedy struck. That's not fair, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. You know that's not fair. But Brenda was on a roll now, circling me like a vulture. What's not fair is how you've held my son back all these years. This business could have been thriving if he hadn't been saddled with you. I turned to Mike, silently begging him to defend me, to remember all we'd been through together. But he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. A knock at the door startled us all. Laura, a familiar voice called. Are you okay in there? Relief washed over me. Helen, I breathed, grateful for my friend's impeccable timing. Brenda's eyes narrowed. Don't you dare let that busybody in here, she hissed. But I was already moving, yanking open the door to reveal Helen's concerned face. Oh, thank God, I murmured, pulling her inside. Helen took in the scene, the broken dishes, Brenda's red face, Mike's hunched shoulders, and her expression hardened. "What's going on here?" "Nothing that concerns you," Brenda snapped. "This is a family matter." Helen's arm went protectively around my shoulders. "Laura is my family," she said firmly. "And from what I can see, she needs me right now." I leaned into her embrace, drawing strength from her presence. "They want me to leave," I said, my voice cracking. Helen's grip tightened. "Leave? This is your home, Laura. You and Mike built this life together." "Built it on lies and disappointment," Brenda interjected. "It's time for my son to start fresh." I looked at Mike, searching for any sign of the man I'd fallen in love with. "Is that what you want?" I asked softly. "To start fresh without me?" He finally met my gaze, and the coldness in his eyes made me shiver. "I think it's for the best," he said, "at least for now." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Helen's arm was the only thing keeping me upright. "Then I'll go," I surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "But don't think for a second that this is over." As Helen led me toward the door, I caught a glimpse of something on the kitchen counter, a stack of papers I hadn't noticed before. My heart clenched as I recognized the letterhead of a local law firm. Divorce papers. They'd already drawn up divorce papers. I stumbled, the final betrayal threatening to overwhelm me. But as I looked back at Mike and Brenda, standing in the wreckage of what was once my happy home, a new emotion surged through me: determination. This wasn't the end of my story, it was just the beginning. I sat on Helen's floral-patterned couch, staring at the divorce papers spread across her coffee table. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, each word a dagger to my heart. "I can't believe he did this behind my back," I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. 15 years of marriage, and this is how it ends?" Helen squeezed my shoulder. "You don't have to sign anything, Laura. We'll fight this." A knock at the door made us both jump. Helen frowned, checking her watch. Who could that be at this hour? She opened the door, revealing a familiar face that made my stomach churn. Ryan Davis, Mike's right-hand man at the grocery store, stood on the porch looking uncomfortable. "Laura," he said, nodding at me, "I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something you need to know." I steeled myself, gesturing for him to come in. "What is it, Ryan?" He perched on the edge of an armchair, wringing his hands. "It's about the business and the divorce papers." My heart raced. "What about them?" Ryan took a deep breath. "I overheard Brenda talking to Mike. She's been planning this for months, Laura. She convinced Mike to transfer most of the business assets to her name to protect them from the divorce settlement." The room spun. I gripped the arm of the couch to steady myself. That's not legal, is it?" Helen, ever practical, was already reaching for her phone. "We need to call a lawyer now." But Ryan wasn't finished. "There's more. Brenda's been sabotaging the business, turning away loyal customers, mismanaging inventory. I think she's trying to run it into the ground." "But why?" I asked, bewildered. "That business is Mike's whole life." Ryan's eyes met mine, filled with sympathy. "I think she wants him completely dependent on her. If the business fails, he'll have nowhere else to turn." The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about getting rid of me. Brenda was orchestrating Mike's entire downfall, all to keep him under her control. "I have to warn him," I said, standing up. Helen grabbed my arm. "Laura, think about this. After everything he's done—" "I know," I cut her off. "But I can't just let Brenda destroy everything we've built, even if Mike and I are over." The drive to Mike's house felt surreal. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw him through the kitchen window, hunched over paperwork. My heart ached at the familiar sight. I knocked on the door, steeling myself. When Mike opened it, his eyes widened in surprise. "Laura, what are you doing here?" I pushed past him into the house. "We need to talk, Mike. It's about the business." He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. "Look, if this is about the divorce—" "It's not," I interrupted. "Well, not entirely. Mike, Brenda's been—" "Don't start with that again," he snapped. "My mother's been nothing but supportive." I laughed bitterly. "Supportive? Is that what you call transferring business assets behind my back?" Mike's face paled. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that she's trying to ruin you, Mike. She's sabotaging the business, driving away customers. Can't you see what she's doing?" For a moment I saw doubt flicker in his eyes, but then his expression hardened. "You're just trying to turn me against her," he said coldly. "I think you should leave, Laura." I stood my ground. "Not until you listen to me. Check the books, Mike. Talk to Ryan. You'll see I'm telling the truth." "Ryan?" Mike's eyes narrowed. "What does he have to do with this?" Before I could answer, a car door slammed outside. We both turned to see Brenda marching up the driveway, her face twisted with rage. "What is she doing here?" Brenda shrieked, bursting through the door. "Mike, I told you not to let her back in this house." As Brenda advanced on me, eyes blazing, I realized with startling clarity that this confrontation was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. I stood in the cramped bedroom of Helen's guest room, staring at the meager collection of belongings I'd managed to salvage from my former life. The divorce papers lay on the nightstand, a constant reminder of the battle ahead. A soft knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. "Laura?" Helen's voice called. "There's someone here to see you." Curious, I made my way to the living room, only to find Ryan standing awkwardly by the fireplace. His presence sent a mix of emotions through me, gratitude for his help, but also a painful reminder of the life I'd lost. "Ryan," I said, forcing a smile, "what brings you here?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Helen before meeting my eyes. "I've got some news about the store." "It's not good, Laura." My heart sank. "What's happened?" Ryan took a deep breath. "Brenda's been making changes, big ones. She's fired 3 long-time employees, including old Mr. Jenkins." I gasped. Mr. Jenkins had been with the store since Mike's father owned it. "She can't do that." "She says she can," Ryan replied, his voice tight. "And that's not all. She's canceling orders from local suppliers, trying to switch to cheaper, mass-produced stuff." The room spun. I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. But that'll destroy everything Mike's father built. The whole community relies on those connections. Helen sat beside me, her hand on my arm. "Laura, maybe it's time to let this go? It's not your fight anymore." I shook my head vehemently. "No, I can't. That store isn't just a business. It's the heart of this town. I won't let Brenda destroy it." Ryan cleared his throat. "There's more. I overheard Brenda talking to her lawyer. She's trying to get Mike to sign over his remaining shares to her. If she succeeds, she'll have complete control," I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. The weight of the situation pressed down on me. I stood up, pacing the room. I need to do something. But what? Mike won't listen to me, and Brenda's got her claws in so deep. Helen's eyes lit up. "What about the divorce papers? You haven't signed them yet, right?" I nodded slowly, realization dawning. "So technically, I'm still co-owner of the business." Ryan leaned forward, excitement in his voice. "Exactly. You could challenge Brenda's decisions, maybe even stop the transfer of shares." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. "I need a lawyer," I said, determination filling my voice. Helen was already reaching for her phone. "I know just the person, tough as nails and hates bullies. She'll eat Brenda for breakfast." As Helen made the call, I turned to Ryan. "Thank you for telling me all this. I know it can't be easy, caught in the middle like this." He shrugged, a small smile on his face. "The store means a lot to me too, Laura, and, well, you've always been kind to me. Unlike some people," he added, his expression darkening. I was about to respond when Helen's excited voice cut through the room. "Laura, the lawyer can see you tomorrow morning. First thing." A surge of energy coursed through me. "Perfect. Ryan, can you get me copies of the store's financial records? Anything that shows what Brenda's been doing?" He nodded eagerly. "I'll have them for you by tonight." As Ryan left, and Helen bustled about, making plans and muttering about, showing that what's what, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The pain of Mike's betrayal was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but now it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. I picked up the divorce papers, running my fingers over Mike's signature. For a moment, I saw us as we once were, young, in love, full of dreams for our future in the store. "I'm sorry, Mike," I whispered, "but I won't let her destroy everything we built, even if I have to fight you both to save it." With a deep breath, I set the papers down and turned to face Helen. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "Let's get to work. We've got a battle to win." I stood outside Sherman's grocery, my heart pounding as I watched customers trickle out, their faces etched with disappointment. The store that had once been the pride of our town now looked shabby and neglected. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door, the familiar bell chime now sounding more like a death knell. Inside, the shelves were half empty, and what little produce remained looked wilted and sad. I caught sight of Ryan behind the counter, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Laura?" he said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God you're here. It's been a nightmare." Before I could respond, a shrill voice cut through the air. "What is she doing here?" Brenda emerged from the back office, her eyes narrowing as she spotted me. "I thought I made it clear you're not welcome here anymore." I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. "I'm still co-owner of this business, Brenda, and from what I can see, it needs all the help it can get," she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "We're doing just fine without your interference." "Are you?" I challenged, gesturing to the empty shelves. "Because it looks to me like you're running this place into the ground." Brenda's face flushed with anger, but before she could retort, the bell chimed again. We all turned to see Mrs. Hawkins, one of our oldest and most loyal customers, enter the store. "Oh, Laura, dear," she said, her face lighting up. "It's so good to see you. I was hoping you might be back." I smiled warmly at her. "It's good to see you too, Mrs. Hawkins. How can we help you today?" She hesitated, glancing around the store. "Well, I was hoping to get some of that lovely local honey you always stocked, and perhaps some fresh vegetables for my famous casserole." My heart sank as I realized we had neither. But before I could speak, Brenda jumped in. "I'm afraid we've had to make some changes to our inventory," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "But I'm sure we can find you some alternatives." Mrs. Hawkins frowned. "Alternatives? But I've been buying the same products here for years. My Herald, God rest his soul, always said Sherman's was the best store in the county because of its local touch." I saw an opportunity and seized it. "Mrs. Hawkins, I promise you we'll have your honey and fresh vegetables back in stock by next week. Won't we, Ryan?" Ryan nodded eagerly, ignoring Brenda's glare. "Absolutely. I'll make the calls myself." Mrs. Hawkins beamed. "Oh, wonderful. I'll be sure to tell everyone at the senior center. We've all been so worried about the changes here." As she left, promising to return, Brenda rounded on me. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You have no right to make promises about this store." "I have every right," I shot back, "and I won't stand by and watch you destroy everything Mike's family built." "Mike agrees with my decisions," Brenda sneered. "He knows what's best for the business." As if summoned by her words, the door opened again, and Mike walked in. He stopped short when he saw me, his face a mix of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. "Laura?" he said, his voice uncertain. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. "Mike, we need to talk about the store, about us, about everything." Brenda immediately latched onto his arm. "Mike, darling, you don't have to listen to her. Remember what we discussed?" But Mike's eyes were fixed on me, and for the first time in months, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. "No, Mom," he said quietly. "I think it's time I heard what Laura has to say." The tension in the room was palpable as Mike, Brenda, and I faced each other. I knew that whatever I said next would determine not just the fate of the store, but the course of all our lives. Taking a deep breath, I began to speak, my voice steady and determined. "Mike, there's something you need to know about what's really been happening here." The tension in the store was suffocating as I laid out everything I knew about Brenda's machinations. Mike's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally, a dawning horror as the truth sank in. That's impossible," he stammered, looking between Brenda and me. "Mom, tell her she's wrong." Brenda's face was a mask of indignation. "Of course she's wrong. This is nothing but a desperate attempt to save her own skin." But I wasn't backing down. "Ryan," I called out, "show Mike the books." Ryan hesitated for a moment, then nodded, pulling out a stack of papers from under the counter. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sherman, but Laura's telling the truth. I've been keeping track of all the changes and, well, see for yourself." Mike's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. I could see the moment reality hit him. His shoulders sagged, and he looked years older in an instant. "How could you do this?" he whispered, turning to Brenda. This store was Dad's legacy. Brenda's mask slipped, revealing a flash of panic before she regained her composure. "Everything I've done has been for your own good, Mike. You needed to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, away from her influence." My influence. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "I've been gone for weeks, and look what's happened. The store's falling apart, Mike, and it's not because of me. Before Mike could respond, the door burst open. A group of angry-looking customers stormed in, led by Mr. Jenkins, the employee Brenda had fired. "Sherman," Mr. Jenkins bellowed, "we want answers. Half the town's talking about how you've run this place into the ground." The situation was spiraling out of control. I watched as Mike, overwhelmed, stumbled back against the counter. I don't understand," he muttered. "How did it get this bad?" Seizing the moment, I stepped forward. "Everyone, please. I know you're upset, and you have every right to be, but yelling won't solve anything. Give us a chance to make this right." Mr. Jenkins narrowed his eyes. "And how do you plan to do that, Laura? Last I heard, you weren't even part of this business anymore." I took a deep breath, aware that my next words could change everything. "I'm still co-owner of this store, and I promise you, starting today, things are going to change." Brenda's shrill laugh cut through the air. "Co-owner? Not for long, dear. Once those divorce papers are signed." "I'm not signing them," I interrupted, my voice steady. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. "In fact, I'm going to fight this divorce with everything I have. This store, this community, it's my home, and I won't let it be destroyed." Mike's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with, buried beneath years of his mother's manipulation. "Laura," he said softly, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," I replied, "but we need to act fast if we're going to save this business." Turning to the crowd, I continued, "I'm asking for your trust and your patience. Give us 2 weeks. If we can't turn things around by then, well, I'll step aside for good." A murmur ran through the group. Finally, Mr. Jenkins spoke up. 2 weeks, Laura. Not a day more." As the crowd dispersed, I felt a mix of relief and terror. What had I just committed to? Ryan approached, a tentative smile on his face. "That was incredible, Laura. But how are we going to do this?" I glanced at Mike, who was staring at the financial records with a lost expression, then at Brenda, whose face was twisted with barely contained rage. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I do know we can't do it alone. Ryan, start calling our old suppliers. See who we can win back. I'll reach out to Helen. We're going to need all the help we can get." As I turned to leave, Mike's voice stopped me. "Laura, wait. I want to help, if you'll let me." I met his gaze, seeing a glimmer of the man I'd once known. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. "Okay," I nodded. "Let's save our store." The past week had been a whirlwind of activity. Ryan and I had been working around the clock, reaching out to old suppliers, mending fences with disgruntled customers, and trying to breathe life back into Sherman's grocery. Mike had been helping too in his own hesitant way, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. I was restocking shelves when I heard the bell chime. Looking up, I saw Mike enter, his face etched with worry. "Laura," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." My heart sank. I'd been waiting for this moment, dreading it. "Okay," I replied, setting down the can I was holding. "What's on your mind?" Mike ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I remembered all too well. "It's about the business. The numbers. They're not adding up." I frowned. "What do you mean? Ryan and I have been going over the books every night." "That's just it," Mike said, his voice rising. "I've been looking at them too, and there are discrepancies, large ones, and they all seem to lead back to you." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "What, Mike? That's impossible. I would never." "Then explain this," he interrupted, pulling out a stack of papers. "These transactions, all made in the weeks after you left. Thousands of dollars, Laura. Where did it go?" I stared at the papers, my mind racing. I don't understand. I never made these transactions." Mike's eyes hardened. "Don't lie to me, Laura. Not now. Was this your plan all along? To bleed the business dry before the divorce?" The injustice of it all made my blood boil. "How dare you?" I hissed. "After everything I've done to save this store, how can you even think that? Because the evidence is right here," Mike shouted, waving the papers. "God, I was such a fool to trust you again." The store had gone silent, customers watching our confrontation with wide eyes. I could feel everything I'd worked for slipping away. "Mike," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "think about this. Who else had access to the accounts? Who's been trying to sabotage this business from the start?" I saw the moment of doubt flicker across his face, quickly replaced by anger. "Don't you dare try to blame my mother for this. She's been nothing but supportive." Supportive? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call manipulating you into serving me divorce papers behind my back? Mike froze. What are you talking about? With shaking hands, I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers I'd been carrying with me. These, Mike, the ones your mother had drawn up weeks ago without my knowledge, the ones you signed. The color drained from Mike's face as he stared at the papers. I never signed these. What? Laura, I swear, I never signed these papers. I didn't even know they existed. The realization hit us both at the same time. Brenda, we said in unison. Just then, the store's phone rang. Ryan answered it, his face growing pale as he listened. Mike, he said, holding out the receiver. It's the bank. They say there's been a large withdrawal from the business account. They need your authorization immediately. Mike lunged for the phone, but I grabbed his arm. Wait, I said urgently. Think about it. Who else has access to that account? Understanding dawned in Mike's eyes, followed quickly by horror. Without another word, he bolted for the door, leaving me standing amidst the chaos of the store. My mind was reeling. Brenda had gone further than we'd ever imagined, forging signatures, embezzling money. But why? What was her endgame? As I watched Mike's retreating figure, I knew we were hurtling towards a confrontation that would change everything. The store, our marriage, our entire lives hung in the balance. Taking a deep breath, I turned to Ryan. Call Helen, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Tell her to meet us at Mike's house. It's time to end this once and for all. My heart pounded as I raced towards Mike's house, Helen and Ryan close behind. The evening sky was darkening, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. As we pulled up, I saw Mike's car in the driveway, alongside Brenda's sleek sedan. They're both here, I said, my voice tight with tension. Helen squeezed my shoulder. We're right behind you, Laura. Whatever happens, we've got your back. Taking a deep breath, I marched up to the front door and threw it open without knocking. The sound of raised voices led us to the living room, where we found Mike and Brenda locked in a heated argument. How could you do this? Mike was shouting, his face red with anger. Your own son. Brenda's eyes widened as she saw us enter. What are they doing here? She hissed. This is a family matter. We are family, I retorted, stepping forward, and it's time for the truth, Brenda. All of it. Mike turned to me, his eyes wild with a mix of emotions. Laura, I'm so sorry. I had no idea, the things she's done. Brenda's composure cracked. I did it all for you, Mike, to protect you from her. She jabbed a finger in my direction. She was going to ruin everything, just like she ruined your chance at having children. The room fell silent. I felt as if I'd been slapped. Is that what this is about? I whispered. Our miscarriage? Mike's face crumpled. Mom, how could you? That wasn't Laura's fault. It was no one's fault. But Brenda was beyond reason now. She took everything from you. Your future, your legacy. I had to do something. So you decided to destroy the business? Ryan interjected, his voice thick with disbelief. How does that help anyone? Brenda's laugh was borderline hysterical. The business? That was just the beginning. Once it was gone, Mike would have nothing left. He'd have to start over with me by his side, the way it should be. The realization of Brenda's plan hit me like a tidal wave. She hadn't just been trying to get rid of me, she'd been systematically dismantling Mike's entire life, all to keep him dependent on her. Mike staggered back as if physically struck. My God, he murmured, all these years, everything you've done. I stepped forward, placing myself between Mike and Brenda. It's over, Brenda. We have proof of everything. The forged signatures, the embezzlement. You can't talk your way out of this. For a moment, I thought she might lunge at me, but then something in her seemed to deflate. You'll never understand, she spat. A real mother would do anything for her child. No, Mike said, his voice stronger now. A real mother wouldn't destroy her child's life for her own selfish needs. Brenda's face contorted with rage. Selfish? I gave up everything for you, and this is how you repay me? She turned to me, eyes blazing. This is all your fault. You turned him against me. Before I could react, Brenda lunged forward, her hands outstretched as if to claw at my face. I stumbled backward, but Mike was faster. He stepped between us, catching his mother's wrists. That's enough, he roared. The authority in his voice seemed to shock even Brenda into silence. You're going to leave now, Mom, and you're never coming back. As Ryan and Helen moved to escort Brenda out, I watched the woman who had caused so much pain and destruction crumble before my eyes. For a moment I almost felt pity for her. The slamming of the front door echoed through the house, leaving Mike and me alone in the sudden silence. We stood there, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on us. Finally, Mike turned to me, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Laura," he whispered, "I don't know if I can ever make this right, but I want to try, if you'll let me." I stared at him, my emotions a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and a tiny flicker of hope. As I opened my mouth to respond, I realized that this moment would define not just our future, but who I was going to be from this point forward. The choice was mine and mine alone. 6 months had passed since that fateful night when Brenda's web of lies unraveled. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blazer, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at me. Today was my first day as a social worker, a path I never imagined I'd take. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Helen beaming at me. "Ready for your big day?" she asked, pulling me into a hug. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. As we drove to the community center, Helen filled me in on the latest town gossip. "Did you hear about Brenda?" she asked hesitantly. I tensed. "What about her?" "She's moved to Florida. Apparently she's not speaking to anyone from town anymore." I nodded, a mix of emotions washing over me. Brenda's actions had caused so much pain, but in a way, they'd also set me free. "And Mike?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Helen's expression softened. "He's still trying to salvage the store. Ryan's been a big help." We pulled up to the community center, and I took a deep breath. "This is it," I said, more to myself than Helen. "You're going to be amazing," Helen assured me. "Those people in there need someone like you, someone who understands what it's like to overcome adversity." As I walked into the building, my mind drifted back to the night everything changed. Mike's plea for a second chance had hung in the air between us, heavy with years of hurt and betrayal. In that moment, I'd made a choice, not just about our marriage, but about the woman I wanted to be. "I can't go back, Mike," I'd told him, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes. "But maybe we can both move forward." The next few months had been a whirlwind of change. Mike and I had decided to separate, but amicably. We worked together to save the store, rebuilding trust not as husband and wife, but as business partners. And in the process, I'd discovered a strength in myself I never knew existed. Now, as I stood in front of my first group of clients, women who'd faced their own battles with manipulative relationships and shattered dreams, I felt a sense of purpose I'd never experienced before. "Welcome, everyone," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "My name is Laura, and I'm here to help you navigate the challenges you're facing. But more than that, I'm here to remind you of the strength you have within yourselves." As I shared my story, the manipulation, the betrayal, the journey to self-discovery, I saw recognition in their eyes. These women understood, in a way no one else could, the courage it took to reclaim your life. "It's not easy," I told them, "but you are not alone, and you are so much stronger than you know." After the session, as I gathered my things, I noticed a familiar figure hovering in the doorway. Mike stood there looking uncertain. "Laura," he said softly, "I hope it's okay that I came. I wanted to see you in action." I felt a flutter in my chest, but it wasn't the ache of lost love. It was pride in myself, in how far I'd come. "Thank you for coming, Mike," I said sincerely. He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You're amazing, you know that? These women are lucky to have you." As we walked out together in comfortable silence between us, I realized something profound. The revenge I'd once craved against Brenda, against Mike, even against life itself for the hardships I'd faced, it had transformed into something far more powerful. I'd found my purpose, my strength, my voice. Standing in the warm afternoon sun, I turned to Mike. "I forgive you," I said, the words lifting a weight I didn't know I'd been carrying, "and I forgive myself too." Mike's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with understanding. "Thank you," he whispered. As we parted ways, Mike to the store, me to meet Helen for a celebratory dinner, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and heartache, but it had led me here, to this moment, to this version of myself. I was Laura Collins, survivor, social worker, and architect of my own happiness, and my story was far from over. The shrill voice of my mother-in-law pierced through the kitchen, making me flinch. "Grace, what on earth have you done to my antique china?" I turned slowly, my heart pounding. Olivia stood in the doorway, her face contorted with rage, holding up a delicate teacup with a hairline crack running along its rim. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I was just trying to what? Destroy a family heirloom?" She marched towards me, her heels clicking ominously on the tile floor. "This set has been in the family for generations, and you managed to ruin it in less than a month of marriage." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. It was an accident, a simple slip of the hand while washing up after our weekly family dinner, but I knew better than to argue with Olivia when she was in one of her moods. "I'll replace it," I offered weakly. Olivia let out a harsh laugh. "Replace it? You can't replace history, you foolish girl. This is exactly why I told Daniel he shouldn't have married you. You don't understand our family, our traditions." The words stung like a slap. I'd only been married to Daniel for a few weeks, and already his mother seemed determined to drive a wedge between us. I searched desperately for my husband, hoping he'd come to my defense, but he was nowhere to be seen. "Mom?" A softer voice called from the hallway. "What's going on?" Amelia, Daniel's younger sister, appeared in the doorway. Her eyes darted between Olivia and me, taking in the tense scene. Olivia's demeanor changed instantly. "Oh, nothing to worry about, dear. Grace just had a little accident with the china. You know how clumsy she can be." I bit my lip, fighting back a retort. Amelia shot me a sympathetic look before addressing her mother. "I'm sure it was an accident. Why don't we all calm down and—" "Calm down?" Olivia's voice rose again. "This isn't the first time she's shown complete disregard for our family's heritage. Remember the incident with your grandmother's brooch?" My cheeks burned at the memory. I'd accidentally knocked the brooch off Olivia's dressing table while helping to clean. It had fallen behind a heavy chest of drawers, and we'd spent hours searching for it. When we finally found it, Olivia had acted as if I'd deliberately hidden it. "That was different," Amelia protested. "Grace was just trying to help." "Help? Ha!" Olivia snorted. "She's been nothing but a disruption since the day Daniel brought her home. I knew she wasn't right for this family." I couldn't take it anymore. "Olivia, please. I never meant to." "Save your excuses," she snapped. "I've heard enough of them. You'll never truly be a part of this family, Grace. The sooner you realize that, the better." With that, she stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me stunned and hurt. Amelia approached, placing a comforting hand on my arm. "Don't listen to her," she said softly. "Mom's always been hard on the women who marry into the family. It's not just you." I looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" Amelia glanced towards the door, then leaned in closer. "There's something you should know about Mom's past. It might explain why she's so difficult." Before she could continue, Daniel's voice called from the living room. "Grace? Mom? Is everything okay?" Amelia squeezed my arm. "We'll talk later," she whispered, then raised her voice. "Everything's fine, Dan. We're just cleaning up." As we busied ourselves with the dishes, my mind raced. What secret was Amelia about to reveal, and how would it affect my already strained relationship with Olivia? I had a sinking feeling that the broken teacup was just the beginning of a much larger storm brewing in our family. As I carefully wrapped the remaining china, I couldn't shake the sense that my life was about to become far more complicated than I ever imagined. I paced our bedroom, my nerves frayed from the confrontation with Olivia. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his face a mix of concern and frustration. "Honey, I'm sure Mom didn't mean—" "Don't," I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't make excuses for her, Daniel. You weren't there. You didn't hear the things she said." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know my mother can be difficult, but she's family, Grace. We have to find a way to make this work." I whirled to face him, anger bubbling up inside me. "Make it work? Daniel, she told me I'd never be part of this family. How am I supposed to make that work?" Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my brother, Victor. "Everything okay, sis? You seemed upset earlier." I hesitated, then typed back, "Can you talk?" "Of course," came the immediate reply. I turned to Daniel. "I need some air. I'm going for a walk." He stood, reaching for me. "Grace, please, let's talk about this." But I was already heading for the door, grabbing my jacket on the way out. The cool evening air hit me as I stepped outside, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Victor answered on the first ring. "What's going on, Gracie?" As I walked, I poured out everything that had happened with Olivia, from the broken teacup to her cruel words. Victor listened patiently, only interrupting to ask for clarification. "She sounds like a real piece of work," he said when I finished. "Have you talked to Daniel about this?" I sighed, kicking at a pebble on the sidewalk. "I've tried, but he always defends her. Says I need to be more understanding." "Understanding of what? Her being a complete witch to you?" Despite everything, I couldn't help but laugh. "Victor, I'm serious, Grace. You don't deserve to be treated like this. Maybe it's time to set some boundaries." I slowed my pace, considering his words. "But how? Daniel's so close to his family, I don't want to come between them." "You're not the one coming between them," Victor said firmly. "Olivia is. And if Daniel can't see that, maybe he needs a wake-up call." As we talked, a plan began to form in my mind. It was risky, but if it worked... "Thanks, Victor," I said, feeling more determined than I had in weeks. "I think I know what I need to do." When I returned home, I found Daniel in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up as I entered, his expression wary. "Feel better?" he asked. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Daniel, we need to talk about your mother." He started to protest, but I held up a hand. "Please, just listen. I love you, and I want our marriage to work, but I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. Your mother's behavior is tearing us apart, and if we don't address it now, I'm afraid of what might happen." Daniel's face softened. "I know it's been tough, Grace, but what can we do? She's my mother." "And I'm your wife," I said, my voice steady. "We need to present a united front. The next time she says something hurtful, I need you to stand up for me. Can you do that?" He hesitated, and for a moment I feared I'd pushed too far, but then he nodded slowly. "You're right, I should have done that from the beginning. I'm sorry, Grace." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Just then, Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. "It's Mom," he said. I felt my stomach clench. "Answer it," I said, steeling myself. "Put it on speaker." Daniel hesitated, then hit the answer button. Olivia's voice filled the kitchen, shrill and angry. "Daniel, you need to talk some sense into that wife of yours. Do you know what she's done now?" I met Daniel's eyes, silently urging him to remember his promise. He took a deep breath, and I held mine, waiting to see what would happen next. The crisp December air nipped at my cheeks as Daniel and I pulled into his parents' driveway. Christmas lights twinkled merrily, a stark contrast to the knot of dread in my stomach. "Remember what we talked about," I whispered, squeezing Daniel's hand. He nodded, his jaw set. "United front, I've got your back, Grace." As we approached the front door, I recalled my mother Sophia's words from our phone call earlier. "Kill them with kindness, sweetie. Don't let her get under your skin." Easier said than done, I thought, as Olivia flung open the door. "There you are," she exclaimed, embracing Daniel while barely acknowledging me. Come in. I've prepared all your favorites, Daniel." We followed her into the living room where Alexander, Daniel's father, greeted us warmly. "Grace, my dear, you look lovely," he said, giving me a gentle hug. "Thank you, Alexander," I replied, grateful for his kindness. Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Grace, be a dear and help me in the kitchen, won't you?" I glanced at Daniel, who gave me an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, I followed Olivia. The moment we were alone, her demeanor changed. "I hope you're not planning on ruining Christmas like you ruined Thanksgiving," she hissed, thrusting a bowl of potatoes at me. "I'm not sure what you mean, Olivia," I said, keeping my voice steady as I began peeling. She snorted. "Don't play innocent. Your little stunt with the china was just the beginning, wasn't it? Now I hear you've been filling Daniel's head with nonsense about me." I focused on the potatoes, willing myself to stay calm. Daniel and I have simply been communicating honestly about our feelings. "Your feelings?" Olivia's voice dripped with disdain. "What about my feelings? My son was perfectly happy before you came along." Before I could respond, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay in here?" Olivia's face transformed instantly. "Of course, darling, Grace and I were just catching up." I met Daniel's eyes, silently pleading. He cleared his throat. "Mom, can I talk to you for a moment?" "Alone?" As they left, I leaned against the counter, my hands shaking. I couldn't keep doing this. The constant tension, the two-faced behavior, it was too much. Suddenly, Amelia burst into the kitchen, her eyes wide. Grace, you need to come quickly. Mom and Dan are really going at it. Heart racing, I followed her to the study. Through the closed door, I could hear raised voices. She's my wife, Mom. You need to treat her with respect. Respect? She's tearing this family apart, and you're too blind to see it. The only one tearing this family apart is you. The door flew open, and Olivia stormed out, her face flushed with anger. She stopped short when she saw me. You, she snarled. This is all your fault. You've turned my own son against me. Before I could react, she raised her hand and slapped me hard across the face. The room fell silent. I stood there, stunned, my cheek stinging. Daniel rushed to my side while Alexander appeared, looking horrified. Olivia, he thundered. What on earth has gotten into you? She turned to her husband, her eyes wild. Can't you see what she's doing? She's destroying everything. Alexander shook his head, his expression a mix of disappointment and anger. The only one destroying anything is you, Olivia. I think it's time you left. Left? She screeched. This is my house. Not anymore, Alexander said firmly. Not until you can behave like a civilized human being. As Olivia's protests grew louder, I slipped away, finding myself in the guest bathroom. I stared at my reflection, my cheek red and throbbing. A soft knock startled me. Grace? It was Amelia. Are you okay? I opened the door, fighting back tears. Amelia's eyes widened as she saw my face. Oh, Grace, she whispered. I'm so sorry, but there's something you need to know, something about why Mom is like this. I looked at her, curiosity overriding my pain. What is it? Amelia took a deep breath. It's about what happened to her when she first married Dad, the real reason she hates all the women who marry into this family. As she began to speak, I realized that the truth behind Olivia's behavior was far more shocking than I could have ever imagined. My head was spinning from Amelia's revelation about Olivia's past. I stumbled out of the bathroom, desperate for fresh air and a moment to process everything. The living room was a battleground of raised voices and accusations. I couldn't bear it anymore. I need some air, I muttered to Daniel, who was locked in a heated argument with his mother. He barely nodded, too engrossed in the family drama unfolding. I slipped out the front door, gulping in the crisp winter air. My cheek still stung from Olivia's slap, a constant reminder of how quickly things had escalated. As I paced the driveway, my bladder reminded me of its urgent need. I'd been so caught up in the chaos that I'd forgotten my initial reason for heading to the bathroom. I glanced back at the house, the muffled sounds of arguing still audible. There was no way I was going back in there. Desperate times called for desperate measures. I scanned the neighborhood, my eyes landing on a quaint house across the street. Before I could second-guess myself, I was hurrying across the road, praying the neighbors were home and in a charitable mood. I rang the doorbell, shifting from foot to foot. An elderly woman answered, her kind face creasing with concern as she took in my flustered appearance. I'm so sorry to bother you, I blurted out. I'm visiting family across the street, and there's been a situation. Would you mind terribly if I used your bathroom? The woman, introducing herself as Mrs. Henderson, ushered me in without hesitation. As I followed her to the bathroom, a plan began to form in my mind. I needed proof of Olivia's behavior, something concrete that Daniel and Alexander couldn't ignore. After using the facilities, I pulled out my handkerchief, a delicate, monogrammed piece that had been a wedding gift from Olivia, of all people. With a silent apology to Mrs. Henderson for my deception, I deliberately left it on the sink counter. Returning to the living room, I found Mrs. Henderson waiting with a cup of tea. You look like you could use this, dear, she said gently. I accepted gratefully, realizing I had an opportunity here. Thank you. It's been a difficult day with my mother-in-law, I began, carefully choosing my words. Mrs. Henderson nodded sympathetically. Family can be challenging, especially during the holidays. You have no idea, I said, seizing the moment. My mother-in-law, she's been, well, cruel, to put it mildly. Today, she even struck me. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened in shock. Oh, you poor thing, that's terrible. I nodded, fighting back real tears. I'm at a loss. My husband tries to support me, but he's caught in the middle. I just don't know what to do anymore. As we talked, I shared more details about Olivia's behavior, painting a clear picture of the abuse I'd endured. Mrs. Maud Henderson listened attentively, her expression growing more concerned by the minute. Finally, I glanced at my watch, feigning surprise. Oh, I should get back. They'll be wondering where I am. I stood, then patted my pockets. Oh no, I think I left my handkerchief in your bathroom. Would you mind if I go grab it? Of course, dear. Go right ahead. I hurried to the bathroom, making a show of looking for the handkerchief. That's strange, I called out. I can't seem to find it. It must have fallen somewhere. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway. Don't worry about it, honey. If I find it, I'll bring it over to you. Which house are you in? I described Olivia and Alexander's house, thanking her profusely. As I left, I felt a twinge of guilt for my manipulation, but I pushed it aside. I needed allies, and more importantly, I needed witnesses. Crossing back to Olivia's house, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what awaited me inside. I had set a plan in motion, one that could either salvage my relationship with my in-laws or destroy it completely. As I reached for the door handle, I heard Olivia's shrill voice from inside. Where is that ungrateful girl? Daniel, go find your wife this instant. My hand froze on the doorknob. This was it, the moment of truth. Whatever happened next would change everything. With one last deep breath, I pushed open the door, ready to face whatever storm awaited me. I stepped into the house, bracing myself for the storm. But instead of Olivia's expected onslaught, I was met with a scene of utter chaos. Amelia and Olivia were locked in a fierce argument, their voices echoing through the halls. How dare you defend her? Olivia shrieked, her face contorted with rage. After everything I've done for this family. Amelia stood her ground, her usually gentle demeanor replaced by steely determination. What you've done? You mean tearing us apart with your cruelty and manipulation? I froze in the doorway, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Daniel caught sight of me and rushed over, his face etched with worry. Grace, where have you been? I was about to come looking for you. Before I could respond, Olivia's sharp voice cut through the air. Oh, look who's decided to grace us with her presence, she sneered. Come to cause more trouble, have you? I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Amelia beat me to it. Enough, Mom. Can't you see what you're doing? You're pushing everyone away with your behavior. Olivia's eyes narrowed dangerously. Don't you dare take her side, Amelia. I'm your mother. And Grace is my sister-in-law, Amelia shot back. She's family too, whether you like it or not. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Alexander, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of shock and dismay, finally spoke up. Olivia, this has gone too far. Your treatment of Grace is unacceptable. Olivia whirled on her husband, her voice dripping with venom. Oh, so you're against me too? After all these years? I watched in stunned silence as the family I had married into unraveled before my eyes. The weight of guilt pressed down on me. Was I really the cause of all this? Suddenly, Amelia turned to me, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. Grace, there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Olivia lunged forward, grabbing Amelia's arm. Don't you dare! But Amelia shook her off, her voice rising above the chaos. Mom was treated horribly by her own mother-in-law when she first married Dad. It was so bad that she almost left him. The room fell silent once more, all eyes turning to Olivia. For a moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, quickly replaced by her usual mask of anger. That has nothing to do with this, she hissed. It has everything to do with this, Amelia insisted. You swore you'd never be like her, but look at what you're doing to Grace. You've become the very thing you hated. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, Olivia's behavior, while still inexcusable, took on a new dimension. I found myself torn between empathy for her past pain and anger at her present actions. Daniel stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. Mom, is this true? Olivia's facade cracked, tears welling in her eyes. For a moment I saw a glimpse of the hurt, scared woman beneath the harsh exterior. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vulnerability vanished. Olivia straightened, her eyes hardening once more. I've had enough of this, she declared. If you all want to side with her, fine. But don't expect me to stand by and watch her destroy this family. With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving us all in stunned silence. Amelia turned to me, her eyes filled with remorse. I'm so sorry, Grace. I should have told you sooner. Maybe things wouldn't have gotten this bad. I shook my head, still processing everything I'd learned. It's not your fault, Amelia. But what do we do now? Daniel wrapped an arm around me, his voice resolute. We stand together. No more letting Mom get away with this behavior. As I looked around at the faces of my in-laws, Daniel's unwavering support, Amelia's fierce loyalty, Alexander's dawning realization, I knew we had reached a turning point. The next steps we took would either heal this family or break it apart for good. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I think it's time we all had an honest conversation about the future of this family, I said, my voice stronger than I felt, and about what role Olivia will play in it. The weight of my words hung in the air, and I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were finally facing the truth, and maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward together. The tension in the room was suffocating as we all stood in stunned silence following Olivia's dramatic exit. I could feel the weight of unspoken words and hidden truths pressing down on us. It was time to lay everything bare. "I have something you all need to hear," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I pulled out my phone. Daniel looked at me quizzically. "Grace, what are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. "I've been recording Olivia's voicemails for the past few months. I think you need to hear what she's really been saying when you're not around." As I played the first message, Olivia's venomous words filled the room. "Listen here, you little homewrecker. I don't care what Daniel says. You'll never be part of this family. I'll make sure of that." The color drained from Daniel's face as message after message played, each one more cruel and threatening than the last. Alexander sank into a chair, his head in his hands, while Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "I had no idea," Daniel whispered, his voice hoarse. "Grace, why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" Before I could answer, a knock at the door startled us all. Alexander went to answer it, and to my shock, Mrs. Henderson from across the street stood there, my handkerchief in her hand. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, her kind eyes filled with concern. "But I found this, and I wanted to make sure you were all right, dear." She looked directly at me, and I felt a rush of gratitude for this unexpected ally. As Mrs. Henderson stepped into the house, she took in the tense scene before her. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, her gaze lingering on my still red cheek where Olivia had slapped me. Suddenly, Olivia's voice rang out from behind us. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, glaring at Mrs. Henderson. The elderly neighbor stood her ground. "I came to return something to Grace and to make sure she's safe. After what she told me about how you've been treating her, I was worried." Olivia's face contorted with rage. "You've been gossiping about our family to the neighbors?" she shrieked at me. "How dare you?" She lunged towards me, but Daniel stepped between us. "That's enough, Mom," he shouted. "We've all heard the voicemails. We know the truth now." Olivia's eyes darted around the room, taking in the shocked and angry faces of her family. For a moment, I saw fear flicker across her features. "You don't understand," she said, her voice suddenly small. "I was just trying to protect our family." "By terrorizing Grace?" Amelia shot back. "By making her feel unwelcome and unloved? That's not protection, Mom. That's cruelty." Alexander finally spoke up, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Olivia, I think it's time you left. We all need some space to process this." Olivia's face crumpled. "You're choosing her over me? Your own wife?" "We're choosing kindness and decency," Daniel said firmly. "Something you seem to have forgotten." As Olivia stormed out of the house for the second time that day, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The truth was finally out, but at what cost? Mrs. Henderson patted my arm gently. "You did the right thing, dear. No one deserves to be treated that way." As she left, promising to be there if we needed anything, I turned to face my in-laws. The room was thick with unspoken emotions. Shock, anger, betrayal, and underneath it all, a glimmer of hope. Daniel pulled me close, his arms strong and comforting. "I'm so sorry, Grace. I had no idea how bad it really was. But I promise you, things are going to change." I looked up at him, then at Amelia and Alexander. "Where do we go from here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alexander straightened, a look of determination on his face. "We heal, we move forward, and we do it together as a family." As we stood there, united in our resolve, I realized we had reached a turning point. The worst was over, but the hardest part, rebuilding our family without Olivia, was just beginning. And I knew, deep in my heart, that this was a challenge we would face head-on, together. The days following the confrontation with Olivia were a blur of tense conversations and sleepless nights. Daniel and I sat at our kitchen table, the weight of our decision hanging heavy in the air between us. "Are we really doing this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "We have to, Grace. After everything she's done, we can't keep her in our lives. It's not healthy for anyone." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Amelia. "Mom's on her way to your place. She's not taking the news well. Be prepared." My heart raced as I showed Daniel the message. We'd barely had time to process our decision to cut ties with Olivia. Now she was coming here. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Daniel squeezed my hand. "We're in this together," he said firmly. As we opened the door, Olivia burst in, her eyes wild and her voice shrill. "How dare you?" she screamed. "After everything I've done for this family, you're just going to throw me away?" I stood my ground, drawing strength from Daniel's presence beside me. "Olivia, your behavior has been unacceptable. We can't continue like this." She turned to Daniel, her voice suddenly pleading. "Sweetheart, you can't mean this. She's turned you against me. Can't you see that?" Daniel shook his head. "No, Mom. Grace hasn't turned me against you. Your own actions have done that." Olivia's face contorted with rage. She lunged forward, her hand raised as if to strike me again. But this time, I was ready. I caught her wrist midair, my voice steady as I said, "Not again, Olivia. Never again." The shock on her face was almost comical. She'd never expected me to stand up to her like this. As she stumbled backward, the fight seemed to drain out of her. "You don't understand," she whimpered. "I was just trying to protect my family." "By tearing it apart?" I asked, my voice softer now. "Olivia, your actions have hurt everyone, including yourself." Just then there was another knock at the door. To our surprise, it was Alexander, looking tired and drawn. "I thought I might find you here," he said to Olivia. As he stepped inside, the air crackled with tension. Alexander turned to us, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, "and I've come to a decision. Olivia, if you can't accept Grace as part of this family, then I'm afraid I can't continue our marriage." The room fell silent. Olivia's face drained of color as she stared at her husband in disbelief. You're choosing them over me?" she whispered. Alexander shook his head. "I'm choosing kindness and respect, something you seem to have forgotten." Olivia crumpled to the floor, her sobs echoing through the room. For a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered all the pain she'd caused, all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep because of her cruel. Daniel knelt beside his mother. "Mom, this is your last chance. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to get help. You need to change." Olivia looked up, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. I don't know how," she admitted, her voice small and broken. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "We can help you, Olivia, but only if you're willing to put in the work. Only if you're truly sorry for what you've done." The room held its breath as we waited for Olivia's response. This was it, the moment that would define our family's future. Would Olivia choose to change, or would she cling to her bitterness? As she opened her mouth to speak, I felt the weight of everything we'd been through pressing down on me. Whatever happened next, I knew our lives would never be the same. The climax of our family drama was upon us, and I braced myself for the fallout, hoping against hope that we'd find a way through this storm together. The weeks following Olivia's breakdown were a whirlwind of change. Alexander, true to his word, asked Olivia to leave their home. The news spread quickly through their social circle, and I watched with a mix of sadness and vindication as Olivia faced the consequences of her actions. One sunny afternoon, as Daniel and I sat on our porch, Amelia pulled up in her car. Her face was a mix of emotions as she approached us. "I just came from Dad's," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Mom's gone to stay with her sister. She's agreed to start therapy." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Daniel squeezed my hand, his eyes reflecting the same cautious hope I felt. As the days turned into weeks, our family began to heal. Alexander became a frequent visitor, his relationship with Daniel growing stronger without Olivia's toxic influence. Amelia and I grew closer, bonding over our shared experiences. One evening, as we all gathered for dinner, including my parents, Sophia and Victor, I looked around the table and felt a surge of gratitude. This was what family should be, supportive, loving, and kind. My mother, ever perceptive, caught my eye. "You look happy, sweetheart," she said softly. I smiled, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "I am, Mom. For the first time in a long time, I really am." Just then Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face growing serious. "It's Mom," he said, looking at me uncertainly. The room fell silent as I nodded for him to answer. He put the phone on speaker. "Daniel? Grace?" Olivia's voice was hesitant, lacking its usual sharp edge. "I wanted to apologize, to both of you. My therapist suggested I make amends, but that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because I'm truly sorry for everything I've done." I felt my breath catch in my throat. Daniel looked at me, his eyes questioning. I took a deep breath and spoke. "Thank you, Olivia. That means a lot to hear." There was a pause, then Olivia continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I have a long way to go, and I understand if you can't forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm working on myself. I want to be better for all of you." As the call ended, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was still hurt and mistrust to overcome, but it was a step in the right direction. Later that night, as Daniel and I lay in bed, he turned to me, his eyes shining with love and admiration. "You amazed me today, Grace," he said softly. "Your strength, your compassion. I fall in love with you more every day." I snuggled closer to him, feeling truly content. "We've been through so much," I whispered, "but we've come out stronger." As I drifted off to sleep, I reflected on the journey we'd been through. The pain, the tears, the moments of despair, they had all led to this. A family healing, relationships strengthening, and a love that had weathered the storm. I thought about Olivia, and for the first time, I felt genuine hope for her. She had a long road ahead, but she had taken the first step. And maybe, just maybe, one day we could all sit around a table together, the past forgiven, if not forgotten. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and renewed. As I stood on our porch watching the sunrise, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The bitterness that had clouded our lives for so long was fading, replaced by a sweetness that came from forgiveness and growth. I smiled to myself, realizing that this was my sweet vengeance, not in Olivia's downfall, but in our family's rise from the ashes of conflict. We had faced the storm together and emerged stronger, more united than ever before. As Daniel joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our love, tested by fire, had proven unbreakable. And in that moment, basking in the warm glow of the rising sun and my husband's embrace, I knew that the best was yet to come.